Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales. Chapter 5062. The new book, God of All Ages, has already gone viral on the internet. You can read it by clicking on my pen name. Kong Shinmu walked forward and came to the light cluster. He could sense that it contained the power of 12 powerful battle runes. There were a total of 2,400 battle runes, which was a top-notch divine dragon weapon. It could even surpass a top-notch divine dragon weapon. Generally, a heaven-grade divine dragon weapon would only have 2,000 battle runes. However, Kong Shinmu's formless weapon contained 2,400 battle runes. This number was simply terrifying. With the addition of some brilliant effects, it could be said to be a divine weapon that was several times more powerful than an ordinary divine dragon weapon. At the very least, it was more than 10 times stronger than Zhao Qingtian's divine dragon weapon. Moreover, the formless weapon could transform into different forms. When it was needed for defense, all the battle runes would be transformed into a defensive form, and when it was needed for attack, it would be completely transformed into an offensive form. If all of them were transformed into offensive battle runes, Kong Shinmu's offensive power would be enhanced by more than 24 times. What a terrifying number it was. It almost allowed Kong Shinmu to directly improve by 2 realms. It was the same in terms of defense. In other words, the effect of this formless weapon could almost increase the cultivation realm of a dragon martial artist by 2 realms. This would be a great improvement in normal times, let alone in a life-and-death situation. Such a powerful improvement could simply be unexpected, and Kong Shinmu would then be able to kill him. In addition to the most basic offensive and defensive battle runes, this formless weapon also has speed battle runes, void battle runes, concealment battle runes. A total of 12 battle runes. Kong Shinmu walked forward, stretched out his hand, and directly touched the light cluster. In that instant, he could feel the immense power contained within the ball of light. 2,400 battle runes, it's really extraordinary. Kong Shinmu suddenly felt emotional. I'll name it Chen Xing. Heaven-grade divine dragon weapon, formless weapon, Chen Xing. As Kong Shinmu stretched out his hand, the light cluster that Chen Xing had turned into continuously circulated in his hand. In this radiance, a longsword slowly condensed in Jiang Shenwu's hand. He had taken the initiative to let Chen Xing transform into the form of a longsword. This was the most common form of a dragon weapon, and it was also the least noticeable. Hence, Kong Shinmu directly transformed Chen Xing into a longsword form to hide himself so that he wouldn't be exposed in advance. At the same time, Kong Shinmu transformed all 2,400 battle runes in Chen Xing into concealment battle runes. The transformation process was extremely fast and was completed in almost an instant. Jiang Shenwu gave it a try. In a short span of a breath, he could even change the shape of the battle runes in Chen Xing at least 10 times. This transformation speed is because of the celestial heavenly stone liquid. Chen celestial battle runes in, 3 hin transforming through, said with a world. Spirit Chen is has, and has, and is has. Is. It's not bad to be able to transform 3 times in one breath. It turned out that the amount of celestial heavenly stone liquid could affect the transformation speed. Kong Shinmu hadn't thought of this. He was glad that he had listened to Emperor Shi's words and used about 50 million gold dragon coins to exchange for more celestial heavenly stone liquid. Although it looked good to transform 3 times in one breath, it wouldn't be able to produce an explosive effect in a short period of time. However, if he could transform 10 times in one breath, Kong Shinmu would be able to control Chen Xing more easily, and he would be able to produce more changes in a short period of time. When Kong Shinmu stretched out his hand and turned Chen Xing into a longsword, the formless weapon aura in the field dissipated. 12 different types of battle runes should be enough. It's suitable for changing in various situations. Huang's celestial heavenly stone said with a smile, this is probably the strongest weapon I have forged in my life. Thank you, Senior. Kong Shinmu was naturally very grateful for Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone's help. Without Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone, he wouldn't have been able to obtain such a powerful formless weapon. Chen Xing was now a priceless treasure that belonged to Kong Shinmu. It was so valuable that no matter how much others offered, Kong Shinmu wouldn't sell it. This formless weapon was the strongest weapon he had before he reached the supreme level. It was even 2 or 3 times more powerful than the so-called top-notch divine dragon weapons of others. Therefore, Kong Shinmu was very satisfied now. Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone's forging level was indeed quite good. Even if the Chen Xing hadn't been integrated with any dazzling materials, its power was already similar to the Phantom Ghost Book and the Great Compassion Dragon Seal that had been dazzled. Of course, what should be dazzled would still be dazzled. How many times can this Chen Xing be dazzled at most? Kong Shinmu asked curiously. This Chen Xing is forged with haze metal. Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone is extremely malleable, and I've added 361 portions of Heaven's Core Stone liquid. I've already calculated that it can be dazzled 7 times on the Chen Xing. 7 dazzles. Kong Shinmu was a little shocked. Even though he was prepared, he was still taken aback. 7 dazzles meant that the Chen Xing could still be strengthened 7 times. Similar to the Heaven's Precious Stone, it could increase the effect of battle runes by 50%. As long as the Heaven's Precious Stone was dazzled, the Chen Xing would have 3,600 battle runes, and its attack and defense would be increased by 36 times. The 9 Precious Stone would increase the attack and defense by 9 times. It would also be a dazzling material that Kong Shinmu liked very much. The Brilliant Stone could completely block a super strong attack. According to the Chen Xing's strength, after dazzling the Brilliant Stone, it could at least block an attack from a supreme powerhouse. Of course, it couldn't be a supreme powerhouse. If it was just an ordinary supreme powerhouse, the Chen Xing could easily block it after dazzling the Brilliant Stone. Unfortunately, it could only block it once in a short period of time. It might not be of much use to others, but once he encountered an opponent of this level, he would still die. However, Kong Shinmu was different. He specifically instructed Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone to add a type of Spectre Battle Rune to the 12 types of battle runes. This was a type of battle rune that could produce spectre energy from the void. As long as the Chen Xing's battle runes were all converted into Spectre Battle Runes, it could instantly recover a lot of energy. This energy could then be replenished by the Brilliant Stone. As for how long it would take to replenish the Brilliant Stone, Kong Shinmu still had to test it out. He couldn't guess at the moment. After forging the Chen Xing, Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone had almost never touched it. After all, Kong Shinmu was the owner of the Chen Xing. Huang's Celestial Heavenly Stone brought the Chen Xing over and handed it to Kong Shinmu. As for its performance, Kong Shinmu had to study it himself. Go and try out the power of the Chen Xing first. Emperor, she said to Kong Shinmu with a smile. This was equivalent to letting him leave first to try out this brand new dragon weapon. Yes. Kong Shinmu naturally couldn't wait. Come with me. Chapter 5063. Kong Shinmu followed Emoya and soon arrived at the training field of the Fortress of Iron Phoenix. In this martial arts practice field, there were still many martial arts discussion stages. They were all places for the dragon warriors of the Iron Phoenix Fortress to train and learn from each other. The arrival of Kong Shinmu and Emoya quickly attracted the attention of many people. How are we going to test the power? Kong Shinmu was still a little puzzled. After all, Emoya was the one who brought him here. You can spar with me. That's enough. Emoya smiled warmly. No one knew what she looked like under the white veil, but just from her voice, one could tell that she was definitely a gentle and beautiful girl. Kang Shinmu was a little surprised to hear her words. Spar with you? Kang Shinmu didn't know how strong Emoya was before, but he actually wanted to spar with her. Although Kang Shinmu guessed that Emoya was definitely very strong, it was just a guess. It seemed that his guess would soon be confirmed. Yes, spar with me. Emoya didn't seem surprised at all. Instead, she said gently, aren't you going to the intermediate permanent relic? I'll go with you. So before that, we can spar with each other and understand each other's strength so that we can cooperate better. Sure. Kang Shinmu became serious when he heard what she said. His expression became extremely solemn. He turned the Chen Xing into a long sword in his hand and felt the power of 2,400 battle runes flowing in it. Dragon transformation. Jiang Shenwu immediately transformed into a pitch-black divine dragon, and the Chen Xing sword in his hand turned into countless blue sword qi, circling around the pitch-black divine dragon. It looked like the stars in the sky and was extremely powerful. Emoya, on the other hand, simply stood on the stage. She didn't look like she had any power at all. Kang Shinmu didn't dare to release too much power at the start. At least, he didn't use the power of the starry sky. Therefore, he just used the power of the divine dragon inheritance to gradually condense and release the devouring power in his body and integrate it into the Chen Xing battle runes. Speed battle runes. Kang Shinmu changed all the Chen Xing battle runes into speed runes. Unfortunately, he could only exert 1/3 of the power. 2,400 battle runes were equivalent to the power of 800 battle runes that Kang Shinmu exerted. The 800 speed runes made Kang Shinmu's black dragon body suddenly accelerate and rush towards Emoya. Jiang Shenwu thought that no matter how weak Emoya was, she couldn't be weaker than a peak emperor-level warrior. So, he directly used the inheritance power of his peak emperor-level dragon god clan and the effect of Chen Xing's speed battle tattoo to release the void dragon sky-raising break at lightning speed. The effect of the speed runes was fully activated. Not only did it make Kang Shinmu's flying speed faster, but it also made Kang Shinmu's speed of releasing the dragon martial technique increase by more than 2 times. A terrifying power erupted at this moment. 6 black dragon shadows condensed from the void and spat out 6 pitch-black dragon breaths. These 6 pitch-black dragon breaths directly enveloped Emoya's snow-white body. There was a loud explosion of light. Kang Shinmu was a little worried, but then, a burst of snow-white brilliance erupted from where Emoya was. This burst of snow-white brilliance condensed into a layer of flowing barrier that protected Emoya's entire body. Then, the 6 pitch-black dragon breaths exploded and landed on Emoya's snow-white brilliance barrier. An amazing power erupted in an instant. Although Kang Shinmu didn't use the power of the starry sky inheritance, nor did he use any powerful means, because of the nature of the devouring power, this move was enough to break the defense of an ordinary peak emperor-level expert. However, for Emoya, Kang Shinmu's attack didn't even seem to be a tickle. She didn't move at all. She didn't even raise her hand. The snow-white brilliance completely blocked Kang Shinmu's attack. This is the divine power. A kind of natural power. This is the first time I've seen Senior Emoya make a move in front of me. She doesn't make a move, does she? She's just defending. However, it seems that little brother Kang Shinmu is in trouble. Because of this war, Kang Shinmu had made great contributions in the war and even made the 4 clans retreat in advance. This kind of contribution made people have a very deep impression of Kang Shinmu. Not to mention that the dragon martial artist Korra Fortress Iron Phoenix were all subordinates of Emperor Shi's divine dragon. They could be considered as Kang Shinmu's own people. Now, many people were ready to watch the show from the sidelines. Kang Shinmu also heard the conversations around him and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Looking at Emoya who was bathed in the white light, he thought to himself, she actually also cultivates the natural power, and it's the divine power? No wonder he couldn't feel her cultivation of the divine dragon inheritance. It turned out that she didn't cultivate the divine dragon inheritance at all. However, the divine power was also a kind of natural power. In other words, Moya didn't need to change into any form of inheritance. She could purely rely on this human body in front of her to fight and explode with extremely strong power. This was the same principle as the inheritance of the power of the starry sky. The natural power was a self-cultivation method invented by the human clan in ancient times. Kong Shinmu, are you looking down on me? Moya's voice carried a hint of anger. Show me all your strength. She actually looked down on Kong Shinmu. However, Kong Shinmu also felt that the other party's defense was indeed more than enough with his current strength. Even his Void Dragon sky-raising break couldn't shake the other party's snow-white brilliance barrier in the slightest. Therefore, Kong Shinmu had no choice but to explode with stronger power. He still didn't use the power of the starry sky inheritance. Anyway, he just wanted to try out the power of the Qin Xing offensive battle runes. Kong Shinmu transformed all the Dragon Soldier Qin Xing's battle runes into offensive battle runes and directly unleashed the 9th stage Ultimate Roaring Dragon Explosion towards Moya. The 9th stage Ultimate Roaring Dragon Explosion was the strongest dragon martial technique that Kong Shinmu cultivated at the moment. For Kong Shinmu, his strongest move was the 9th stage Ultimate Roaring Dragon Explosion without using the power of the Starry Sky inheritance. Moreover, the Qin Xing Dragon Soldier had transformed all the battle runes into offensive battle runes. Although he could only use 1/3 of them, it was still equivalent to the strength of 800 offensive battle runes. 9th stage Ultimate Roaring Dragon Explosion. 9 dark divine dragon shockwaves swept towards Moya from the direction of the divine dragon body that Kong Shinmu was in. An extremely terrifying shockwave swept through the surroundings at this moment, and it even caused the entire arena to shake. Chapter 5064. The 9th stage Extreme Dao Flood Dragon Explosion roared as it charged towards Moya. Moya was still standing in the same spot. She didn't seem to be moving, but the snow-white brilliance on her body had completely condensed to form a physical barrier. This barrier seemed to have a stronger defensive ability than the previous light barrier. As for Jiang Shenwu's 9th stage Extreme Dao Horn Dragon Explosion, it very quickly landed on her physical barrier. Soon, the power of the 9th level Ultimate Dragon Explosion exploded. The terrifying power was completely reflected and bombarded in front of Kong Shinmu. It can be reflected? Jiang Shenwu's expression changed slightly. The Celestial Star Dragon weapon immediately transformed into 2,400 defensive battle runes. At this moment, it transformed into a starry barrier that protected his entire body. With a loud bang, Kong Shinmu was sent flying by his own power. He was in disbelief. He hadn't expected Moya, who had always looked gentle and weak, to be so powerful. At the very least, when Kong Shinmu used the Qin Xing dragon weapon, he couldn't defeat her. He couldn't even make her move. This triggered Kong Shinmu's competitive spirit. Phantom Ghost Book. Kong Shinmu's Phantom Ghost Book appeared. At the same time, the Nothingness Ruby Stone and the 9-layered Ruby Stone were fully activated. 81 levels, Ultimate Dragon Explosion. A total of 81 terrifying black divine dragon lights condensed in Kong Shinmu's body. He had originally been sent flying by his own power. However, at this moment, he shuttled through the void and appeared above Moya in a flash. Following that, 81 black dragon breaths exploded with a loud bang. Initially, Kong Shinmu was a little unconvinced. He didn't believe that Moya could possess such terrifying power. However, as the 81 dark dragon breaths descended, Moya still showed no signs of moving. The layer of divine power condensed into a snow-white barrier, completely blocking his attack. Before Kong Shinmu could react, he realized that his attack had been absorbed by the snow-white barrier and then rebounded. What the hell is this? Moya's strength was truly shocking. When Kang Shinmu sensed the rebounding force, he immediately unleashed the defensive power of the Great Compassion Dragon Seal and formed a golden barrier to defend himself. The holy power was unbreakable. Under the snow-white barrier, Moya was still standing calmly on the arena. She did not look like she had suffered from Kang Shinmu's fierce attack at all. Kang Shinmu, why are you so anxious? Moya covered her mouth and chuckled, it's impossible for you to defeat me with your current strength. Didn't we agree to let you test the power of Chenxing? Why did you change to another warrior? Hearing this, Kang Shinmu could not help but blush. He had been flustered by the power of his own attack. Although he had managed to block it with the Great Compassionate Sky Dragon mark, he had still been intimidated by Moya's power. Senior Moya, what level are you exactly? Kang Shinmu smiled bitterly. Originally, he had thought that Moya's force of nature was just slightly stronger and had reached a higher level of Supreme God. But now, it seemed that his inherited techniques of the dragon gods could not do anything to her. Thinking of how she addressed Emperor Shi and Zai, he felt that she was not as simple as he had thought. Just like your master. Moya said this rather calmly. But this sentence made Kang Shinmu instantly freeze on the spot. Just like Emperor Shi's divine dragon. That meant that Moya actually had supreme strength. How shocking was this? Moya looked like a weak woman and her style of doing things was also extremely gentle. At one point, Kang Shinmu even thought that Moya was just a maid of Emperor Shi's divine dragon. But now it seemed that he had guessed completely wrong. Moya had actually cultivated the divine power to an unparalleled level. She was a supreme super expert. In terms of the cultivation of the force of nature, she had already gone much further than Kang Shinmu. No wonder Shi, Emperor Shi Divine Dragon, and Zai Divine Dragon all called each other by their names. Because the two of them were basically existences of the same level. Senior, you are really unexpected. Kang Shinmu smiled bitterly. Not really. Moya chuckled softly. Actually, why do you think I have been following you for the past 6 months? It is to protect you. In the past 6 months, I have helped you get rid of many opponents. Hearing this, several scenes suddenly appeared in Kang Shinmu's mind. Sometimes, when he was fighting on the battlefield outside the Outland Fortress, he even felt that super existences stronger than him, who were above the 7th level of Supreme God, seemed to have already discovered his appearance. At that time, he wanted to hide and avoid them. But very quickly, the aura disappeared. Previously, he had thought that he had successfully hidden himself, but now it seemed that Moya had just helped him get rid of them. So, it is your own fault for not observing carefully. Moya pursed her lips and smiled gently. Alright. Kang Shinmu could only shake his head. This formless weapon, Chenxing, is indeed very strong and easy to use. However, it is still lacking some things. I need some dazzling materials that can increase the combat power of the Chenxing warrior by several times. Do you want me to accompany you to buy dazzling materials? Moya suggested. Alright. Kang Shinmu only thought for a moment before nodding. Buying dazzling materials was a very important matter as it would affect everything for Chenxing in the future. Which 7 dazzling materials to choose was too important for Chenxing, the formless weapon. Choosing which 7 materials to spend would mean which aspect of strengthening Chenxing in. As for which dazzling materials were more useful and suitable for the formless weapon, if Moya followed him, she could also give him some suggestions. As for Moya, now that Kang Shinmu knew her strength and identity, he did not think too much about her. He had also cultivated the power of nature. Kang Shinmu did not feel that he was an anomaly. However, looking at Moya's expression and the chatter of the dragon warriors around the arena, Kang Xinmu knew that things were not so simple. Divine power was different from the power of the starry sky. It was a kind of power of nature that had been circulating in the dragon god's world, but there were not many people who cultivated it. While the surrounding dragon warriors were discussing, Kang Xinmu received news that there was a divine power temple in the dragon god's world. In this temple, the inheritance of divine power could be imparted. Chapter 50-65. For the ordinary practitioners of the Dragon God clan, the disciples of the Dragon God clan who cultivated the divine power were basically failures. Because only those who could not inherit the awakened divine dragon blood would cultivate the divine power. So, under normal circumstances, those who cultivated the divine power were relatively low-key. For example, the girl in front of Kang Xinmu, Moya, was also very low-key. Although her strength could even be compared with Emperor Shi's divine dragon, Zai divine dragon, and other supreme experts, she was very low-key in both her actions and her style. No one could tell that she was actually a supreme expert. So, in this case, Moya's identity was more sensitive. Of course, after all, she was a supreme expert, and she had a good relationship with Emperor Shi's divine dragon and Zai divine dragon. Her status in the dragon gods was naturally not bad. Even if someone looked down on her, they would not show it in front of her. As for when they were in the fortress of Iron Phoenix, the dragon warriors of the fortress of Iron Phoenix were naturally very respectful to Moya. That's a senior-level figure, after all. Moreover, in the war at the fortress of Iron Phoenix, Moya had participated in the war and saved many people's lives. These people were extremely grateful to her. Let's go to the Holy Land of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice to buy things. Moya said with a smile, the Holy Land of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice is quite complete. However, you only need to choose 5 brilliant materials. As for the other 2, Emperor Shi and I will prepare one for you. Hearing her words, the first thing that came to Kang Xinmu's mind was to thank her. Thank you, Senior, but soon he had some doubts. But, why is Senior so good to me? And can supreme experts go to the intermediate relic? I am good to you because you are Emperor Shi's disciple, Moya said softly. As for the intermediate relic, we inheritors of the power of nature will not be restricted from entering. However, after entering, we can only use the strength equivalent to the peak of the Emperor level. Hearing this, Kang Xinmu immediately nodded. In other words, people like me can also enter the intermediate relic. However, the power of inheritance of the starry sky will be limited to the peak of the Emperor level. Then he was a little nervous. Doesn't that mean that if Senior enters the intermediate relic, she can only use the strength of the peak of the Emperor level? Doesn't that mean? Isn't it very easy to be killed? Moya smiled gently. You're thinking too much. Even if our strength is suppressed to the peak Emperor stage, we still have many more tricks up our sleeves than the average peak Emperor stage. Of course, there is still the possibility of death, but it's just not that high. Then I'm sorry to trouble Senior to accompany me on this adventure. Kang Xinmu's words came from the bottom of his heart. It's fine. Moya only said these 2 words softly and didn't say anything else. One day later. On a sunny day, Kang Xinmu and Moya returned to the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land. Gu Xinyue was also walking with them. Gu Xinyue also wanted to prepare some emergency items for this trip to the intermediate relics, such as some recovery elixirs and so on. After all, permanent intermediate relics were definitely dangerous. For a young dragon martial artist like her, it could be said to be a narrow escape from death. Fortunately, if he was with Kang Xinmu, Moya, and the others, it would be safer. Of course, if he wanted to obtain better items and obtain more rewards, he would have to take risks. Kang Xinmu and the 2 girls once again arrived at the treasure pavilion where they had previously purchased their items. The shopkeeper of the treasure pavilion immediately came out to welcome them. Little brother Jiang, welcome again. What do you need this time? Mainly I need dazzling materials. Kang Xinmu didn't plan to hide anything, so he straightforwardly stated his purpose. The shopkeeper brought the three of them to the dazzling materials counter. There were thousands of dazzling materials on sale here. Among them, the more commonly used types were more plentiful. For example, dazzling materials like the heaven-shocking gem could increase the effect of battle runes on a battle weapon by 50%. 100 battle runes were equivalent to the power of 150 battle runes. 1,000 battle runes were equivalent to the power of 1,500 battle runes. For example, the formless weapon, Chen Xing, that Kang Xinmu had obtained had a total of 2,400 battle runes. If he used the heaven-shocking gem to dazzle it, it would be equivalent to 3,600 battle runes. This was the basic dazzling material, and the price of the heaven-shocking gem was not too expensive, so most dragon martial artists could afford it. However, Kang Xinmu didn't plan to use the ordinary heaven-shocking gem to dazzle the Chen Xing this time. After all, the formless weapon was a super godly dragon weapon, and it would accompany Kang Xinmu for a long time. It would be too wasteful to use the ordinary heaven-shocking gem to dazzle a super godly dragon weapon of this quality. What Jiang Shenwu wanted was that kind of heaven-shaking gem that had been refined. Many dazzling materials could be refined. As for the refined heaven-shocking rosetone, its effect would be slightly stronger than the heaven-shocking rosetone. As for how much stronger, it would depend on what was used to refine it, and the level of refinement. The effect would be completely different. For example, Kang Xinmu remembered that there was a decent heaven-shocking gem in the treasure pavilion. This heaven-shocking gem has been refined thrice, and each refinement increased its effect by 10%. The shopkeeper excitedly introduced it to Kang Xinmu. In other words, this refined heaven-shocking gem can increase the effect of your battle runes by 80%. A battle rune with 1,000 battle runes is equivalent to 1,800 battle runes. It is 30% more effective than an ordinary heaven-shocking gem. The price of this refined heaven-shocking gem is relatively cheap compared to its effect. It only costs 250,000 gold dragon coins. A heaven-shocking gem that had been refined thrice was indeed quite rare. Moreover, a heaven-shocking gem that had been refined thrice had increased its effect by 10%, which meant that all three refinements were perfect. It wasn't that there weren't better heaven-shocking gems, but that a heaven-shocking gem that had been refined thrice could basically only be used by supreme powerhouses. The effect would only increase by 10%, but the price would be more than 10 times more expensive. This was because the difficulty of the fourth refinement was abruptly higher than the previous three refinements. Therefore, to Kang Xinmu, this refined heaven-shocking gem's price-performance ratio was already quite suitable. Chapter 5066. Although it was worth 250,000 gold dragon coins, it was a relatively expensive item for the treasure pavilion. It was even equivalent to the total amount that Kang Xinmu had spent on his last shopping trip. However, to the current Kang Xinmu, 250,000 gold dragon coins was really nothing. In the past half a year, he had not only obtained a lot of Dubhe stone liquid, but he had also accumulated a lot of achievement points. He had also stolen a lot of cultivation resources from his opponents. After converting everything, Kang Xinmu still had more than 1,000,000 gold dragon coins on him. Therefore, 250,000 gold dragon coins were nothing to him. A perfect thrice-refined heavenly gemstone. Kang Xinmu paid with satisfaction and accepted the heavenly gemstone. Then, he found a relatively cheap dazzling material. Although it was cheap, it was still very rare. It was just that most people didn't need it. The effect of this dazzling material was that when it illuminated more than 3 types of battle patterns, the effect of each additional battle pattern would be increased by 10%. This was equivalent to another type of heavenly gemstone. It was impossible to illuminate a battle weapon with 2 of the same materials. However, this dazzling material wasn't a type of heavenly gemstone. It was the myriad crystals. Ordinary battle weapons didn't need the myriad crystals at all. This was because ordinary battle weapons would at most have 3 types of battle patterns. For example, Kong Shinmu's Phantom Ghost book was already the limit for ordinary battle weapons. However, the myriad crystals were only effective on battle weapons with more than 3 types of battle patterns. Furthermore, the myriad crystals weren't very effective on battle weapons with only 4 or 5 types of battle patterns. It could only increase the effect of the battle patterns by 10% or 20%. However, the myriad crystals were the most suitable dazzling material for Kong Shinmu's formless weapon star. This was because there were 12 different types of battle patterns inside the formless weapon star. These 12 battle patterns, when combined with the myriad crystals, could increase the effect of each battle pattern by 90%. It was equivalent to doubling the effect. This effect was even stronger than the effect of the thrice-refined sky-shocking gemstone. It was so strong that it was terrifying. This was also why Emperor Shi's mystical dragon and Huang Shanke had hoped that Kong Shinmu would use more costs to exchange for the Dubhe stone liquid, so that the formless weapon he forged would have more types of battle patterns. Not only did it allow for more variations in battle, but it also increased the overall strength of the battle soldiers. The shocking gem increased the effect of battle runes by 80%, while the myriad crystals increased the effect of battle runes by 90%. It added up to 170% of the battle pattern's effect, which was more than double. If these 2 dazzling materials were to be absorbed, the formless weapon Chen Xing's original 2,400 battle runes would be equivalent to 4,080 battle runes. If these battle patterns were completely transformed into offensive battle patterns, then the attack power that Kong Shinmu could unleash would be 40 times stronger than the initial one. Who in the same realm could withstand an attack that was 40 times stronger than normal? And this was only the most basic transformation of the formless weapon Chen Xing, which was also the 2 most basic dazzling materials that Kong Shinmu had prepared for it. In fact, the Chen Xing could be dazzled 7 times, and each time was the greatest improvement. The myriad crystals are worth 50,000 gold dragon coins. Although they are rare, most people wouldn't buy them. Kong Shinmu paid with satisfaction and accepted the myriad crystals. The value of the diverse crystal stone was actually very high. After all, it was produced in too little quantities. Unfortunately, there were too few people who could use it. In fact, there wasn't a single person in the entire 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land who could use it. Naturally, the price of this item couldn't go up. Apart from these 2 dazzling materials that could enhance the effect of battle runes, Kong Shinmu also planned to give the Chen Xing some more functional effects. For example, the Splendor Gemstone and the Divine Seal Gemstone. These 2 gemstones were used by Kong Shinmu to dazzle the Great Compassion Sky Dragon Seal, which was a defensive dragon weapon. It still brought a lot of benefits to Kong Shinmu. The Splendor Gemstone could use the war weapon's defensive runes as a foundation. Together with the cultivator's own cultivation base, they could form an extremely strong defensive barrier. When Kong Shinmu had not reached the peak of the Emperor level, the Splendor Gemstone could already block the attacks of high-level transcendent gods. If Kong Shinmu had reached the first stage of the transcendent god level, the Splendor Gemstone could even block the attacks of ordinary supreme gods. Of course, if he really fought a supreme god one-on-one, he definitely wouldn't be a match. Even if he could block it once, it would only be once. After blocking it once, Kong Shinmu's devouring power wouldn't be able to devour his opponent's power in time for the Splendor Gemstone to recover. Then, he would still die. It's better not to use this kind of thing that surpasses one's own ability. Most importantly, I have the starry small world. I'm just a step away from unsealing the 3rd layer of the seal. When that time comes, I'll be able to deal with opponents at the peak of the transcendent god level. I also only have one chance, but this starry small world seal has to be unsealed sooner or later. Kang Xinmu thought to himself. He was very clear about how to choose the Splendor Gemstone. Although the formless weapon Splendor Gemstone could be Splendor 7 times because it was made of the ancient material shock metal, Kang Xinmu still didn't want to waste even a single time. Currently, the formless weapon Splendor Gemstone could only be Splendor by 40 times. Regardless of whether it was converted into offensive, defensive, or void battle patterns, it was only around 40 times. This was the effect of the refined heavenly precious stone and the myriad crystals. Therefore, Kang Xinmu felt that it wasn't enough. It was said that the amplification of Supreme Dragon weapons could reach more than 100 times. Therefore, it wasn't enough. If the 9-layered gemstone is used for splendor, it can make any technique released by a dragon martial artist directly become 9 times. Attack, it can turn into 9 attacks. Defense can also be turned into 9 layers of defense. This is an excellent gemstone. Unfortunately, it's not the best gemstone. The best splendor material for this kind of multiple attacks was still the 33 divine feathers. The 33 divine feathers were said to be the best splendor material obtained by a supreme expert from a super relic on the chaos battlefield. In the entire world of the dragon gods, there were less than 100 of them. Only the relic of the ancient divine feathers would have this kind of splendor material. After splendor of the 33 divine feathers on a battle weapon, it could make the battle weapon release up to 33 attacks, defenses, and so on. One could imagine how powerful this thing was. For example, when Jiang Shenwu used the 9-stage Extreme Dao Flood Dragon Burst, there should be 9 bursts of darkness energy each time. And when he used the 33 Heavens Divine Plume Brilliance, there should be close to 300 bursts of darkness energy. Chapter 50-67. Of course, it wasn't easy to get a dazzling material like the 33 Heaven Divine Feathers. Kang Xinmu had seen one in the treasure pavilion before. It was priced at 3.5 million gold dragon coins. This price was considered quite high. Kang Xinmu believed that he could get it if he haggled a little. The 33 Heaven Divine Feathers weren't as invincible as he imagined. It wasn't like he could directly use the dragon martial technique to unleash 33 attacks. There were certain conditions. At the start of the battle, the power of the 33 Heaven Divine Feathers hadn't been awakened yet. He could only unleash 9 attacks. However, as the battle continued, the 33 Heaven Divine Feathers would absorb power from heaven and earth. The power would become denser and denser until he could unleash 33 attacks. In other words, the dazzling effect of the 33 Heaven Divine Feathers was the best in a protracted battle. This was perfect for Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu was originally suitable for protracted battles and focused on defense. In the future, after the Divine Dragon's blood essence increased in grade, he would definitely focus on defense when fighting with the power of the dragon gods. He would first put himself in an invincible position before considering a counterattack. The 33 Heaven Divine Feathers would be his strongest weapon for a counterattack. Moreover, even if he wanted to kill his opponent in an instant, the 33 Heaven Divine Feathers could unleash 9 attacks that weren't any weaker than the 9-layered gem stone. 40 times the strength of the attack, 33 attacks stacked together, it was simply hopeless. Kang Xinmu felt that when he reached the first level of the Divine Dragon's blood essence, he might be able to defeat the 4th level of the Transcendent God. It was a pity that he hadn't reached the first level of the Transcendent God and couldn't unleash the full power of Chen Xing. At most, he could only fight to a draw with the 3rd level of the Transcendent God. Refined gem stone, numerous crystals, and 33 Heaven Divine Feathers. There are 3 dazzling materials in total. 33 attacks and 33 defenses. It was quite comfortable to use them to deal with ordinary attacks. There were 4 left. 2 of them were gifts from Moya and Emperor Shi's Mystical Dragon Association. He didn't need to consider them. This meant that Kang Xinmu had to choose 2 more dazzling materials himself. As for the 33 Heavens divine plume, Kong Shinmu didn't have enough gold dragon coins to buy it. However, he could take out a lot of materials as collateral. On this point, the shopkeeper of the treasure pavilion also agreed after consulting the elders behind him. After all, Kong Shinmu had Emperor Shi as his backer. Emperor Shi's prestige as a mystical dragon was much greater than he had imagined. Therefore, Kong Shinmu directly used the materials as collateral, and the treasure pavilion completely accepted it. Generally speaking, the treasure pavilion would definitely not accept this kind of credit. After all, once the person died, the debt would be completely erased. With Kong Shinmu's current level of cultivation, he could die at any time. But with Emperor Shi's divine dragon backing him up, things would be different. Even if Kong Shinmu accidentally died, the treasure pavilion could still ask Emperor Shi's divine dragon to pay for it. Existences at the level of Emperor Shi and the divine dragon would not go so far as to go back on their word. Therefore, Kong Shinmu directly obtained the 33 Heavens divine plume. Next, Kong Shinmu continuously searched for thousands of dazzling materials. Unfortunately, he didn't find anything suitable. Some dazzling materials had good effects, but Kong Shinmu felt that he was still far from his goal. He couldn't strengthen the formless weapon Chen Xing to the level he wanted. I'll leave 2 spots for now. For now, 3 dazzling effects are enough. In the end, Kong Shinmu gave up. The choice of 7 dazzling materials was indeed difficult, but Kong Shinmu didn't feel conflicted. Since he couldn't decide for now, he wouldn't choose for now. He would leave the spots empty for now. Anyway, at this stage, the formless weapon Chen Xing that Kong Shinmu used could not be used to its full power. If he really wanted to use the Chen Xing's full power, Kong Shinmu still had to reach the transcendent level. Before that, Kong Shinmu planned to adapt to the Chen Xing's fighting style. If he could improve his compatibility with the Chen Xing and their minds were connected, Kong Shinmu believed that his combat power would be stronger. Moreover, after cooperating with the Chen Xing for a certain period of time, Kong Shinmu would understand what kind of dazzling materials were more suitable for a transcendent divine dragon weapon like the Chen Xing. After all, the formless weapon was extremely rare in the entire dragon gods. Before Kong Shinmu, there were only 2 known of them. Therefore, there was really no experience to talk about what kind of dazzling material to use. Since it was decided, Kong Shinmu temporarily left the treasure pavilion. In the process, Moya still gave Kong Shinmu a lot of constructive suggestions. For example, she was the one who suggested to Kong Shinmu to buy the 33 Heavens God Feather. She also put it on credit and let Kong Shinmu use the materials as collateral. There were also many other dazzling materials that did not catch Moya's attention. That was why Kong Shinmu did not find other dazzling materials. Otherwise, with Kong Shinmu's vision, he would still be able to find many suitable materials. Unfortunately, Moya was much more experienced than Kong Shinmu. She was more knowledgeable and had a very accurate understanding of many dazzling materials. Therefore, she was very clear about which dazzling materials were really strong, and which were relatively weak. For example, she criticized Kong Shinmu for dazzling the illusory ghost book with the rose stone of nothingness. This dazzling effect increased the power of the illusory ghost book by relying on the perception of the void. It sounded very strong. After all, Kong Shinmu's perception of the void was very strong. But in fact, the effect was only average, and the power did not increase by much. This kind of rose stone of nothingness was prepared for dragon weapons with specific effects. When Kong Shinmu dazzled the illusory ghost book, the effect was really average. And when Kong Shinmu used it, he felt that this was indeed the case. Therefore, he listened to Moya's advice. Since I can't find more suitable materials, then I will not look for more for now. After leaving the treasure pavilion, Kong Shinmu muttered to himself, let's first study the information about the permanent middle grade relic. Let's go back to the Gu family first. The Gu family was now a resting area that Kang Xinmu frequented. Ever since Kang Xinmu defeated Zhao Qingtian, no one dared to find trouble with the Gu family. Moreover, Emperor Shi seemed to have given many people a warning because of the incident with Zhao Qingtian. Gu Xinyue, Kang Xinmu, Chu Yueqiang, and the others were all cultivators of the new power of inheritance. At the same time, they had not given up their identity as dragon warriors. Whoever attacked them would be disrespecting Emperor Shi and the Divine Dragon. Under such circumstances, who would dare to provoke Kang Xinmu and the others? Kang Xinmu and the others successfully returned to the Gu family residence. Then, they began to discuss the permanent middle-grade relic. With Moya's strength, she was completely qualified to enter the high-level relic, or even the super relic, let alone the middle-grade relic. Chapter 5068. Of course, Kang Xinmu felt that since Moya dared to enter an intermediate permanent relic with him, she definitely had some life-saving means, even though she would be suppressed. After returning from the treasure pavilion of the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land, Kang Xinmu stayed at the Gu family residence. He first used the refined heavenly precious stone, the numerous crystals, and the 33 heavens divine feathers. These three dazzling materials were transformed into the formless celestial star brilliance. Their power was completely integrated into the celestial star. From then on, the celestial star had three dazzling transcendent divine dragon weapons. Although Kang Xinmu could only release the power of 800 battle patterns at the beginning, the power and effect of these 800 battle patterns were already equivalent to 2,160 battle patterns after the dazzling transformation. Compared to the Phantom Ghost book that Kang Xinmu had used before, this could be said to be a qualitative improvement. With the celestial star, I basically have an absolute crushing advantage over others in terms of battle weapons. Kang Xinmu was now very satisfied. In the past, he had always been at a disadvantage in terms of battle weapons. Now, these disadvantages had not only been made up for, but they had also surpassed others and become an advantage. Once he reached the level of Super Divine Dragon, he would be able to fully exert the effect of the Celestial Star, which would be a base increase of 2,400 battle patterns by 24 times. Coupled with the refined heavenly precious stone and the numerous crystals, the celestial star alone would be able to increase the power of Kang Xinmu's dragon martial technique by nearly 65 times. These dazzling materials would increase the power of the celestial star by more than 40 times. Coupled with the effect of the 33 heavens divine feathers, Kang Xinmu did not dare to imagine how terrifying his attack would be. Even an ordinary high-level Holy Spirit dragon martial technique, the 9th stage Extreme Roaring Dragon Blast, would be able to erupt with unimaginable power. It seems that when I reach the Transcendent grade, I still have to cultivate other dragon martial techniques and the Transcendent grade Super Divine Dragon martial technique. The high-level Holy Spirit dragon martial technique was currently the strongest dragon martial technique for Kang Xinmu. But once he reached the Super Divine Dragon level, it would be different. If he continued to use the Transcendent grade Holy Spirit dragon martial technique, the power would be somewhat insufficient. Of course, even if he only relied on the celestial star, Kang Xinmu could still temporarily defeat a Transcendent grade opponent who was much stronger than him. If he cultivated the Transcendent grade divine dragon martial technique, he would naturally be even stronger. Now that he had cultivated the divine dragon martial technique, he would be even stronger. However, the inherited strength of the Dragon God clan was rapidly improving with the possession of the formless weapon, Chen Xing. In any case, Mu Divine Dragon Martial Technique would be to the Divine Dragon Martial Technique. Jiang Shen Tian Star would to mention, the Divine Dragon. And Celestial Mu, the Divine Dragon Martial Artists, Dragon Martial Artists, Dragon, Divine Dragon Emperor Dragon Martial Artists was, Tian, the Dragon, Star, King, and Dragon Level, and King, and Dragon, was, Divine Dragon. Be it their aura or power, they had reached the level of Divine Dragon. Originally, Gu Xinyue's strength was equivalent to the first stage of the transcendent grade. But now that she was facing Kang Xinmu, she realized that the first stage of the transcendent grade was not enough. Once Kang Xinmu used the celestial star, she would not be able to withstand it. At first, it was fine. Kang Xinmu did not use his full strength and only used the basic effect of the celestial star. However, as Kang Xinmu used his dazzle ability, she could not withstand it and was completely defeated. Kang Xinmu, with the enhancement of the celestial star, I'm afraid you can easily defeat a second-stage transcendent grade opponent. You are comparable to a third-stage transcendent grade expert. Gu Xinyue could not help but sigh. Generally speaking, which peak Emperor-level dragon weapon would be so luxurious? The foundation was 2,400 battle patterns, and it had such a luxurious dazzle effect. Although Kang Xinmu could only unleash the power of 800 battle patterns, it was already stronger than almost all Emperor-level holy spiritual dragon weapons. It's not enough. I have to be stronger. Kang Xinmu shook his head slightly. Of course, he only said this in his heart. If he really said it out loud, he would definitely be beaten up. Wasn't he too good at pretending? But in reality, that was what Kang Xinmu thought. He could not see any hope of reaching the level of the ancestral dragon. If it was the supreme dragon, Kang Xinmu could still see the target and the route. However, when it came to the ancestral dragon, Kang Xinmu did not have any thoughts about it. If he could not reach the ancestral dragon level, he might not be able to rescue his father from the dragon's sealing abyss. No matter what, Kang Xinmu's current strength was not bad. Obtaining Chen Xing allowed him to cross 2 levels to fight with enemies. Originally, he could only defeat a level 1 transcendent god and fight with a level 2 transcendent god with the power of the dragon gods. But now, he could easily defeat a level 2 transcendent god and even suppress a level 3 transcendent god. If the battle lasted for a long time, he might even be able to kill a level 3 transcendent god. Kang Xinmu and Gu Xinyue were sparring in the martial arts field. They were not only testing Chen Xing's attack power, but also his other abilities. For example, defensive ability. Chen Xing's defensive ability exploded, and Kang Xinmu turned all the battle patterns into defensive battle patterns. Then, the endless power of Chen Xing condensed into 9 layers of Chen Xing barriers around Kang Xinmu's divine dragon body. The defensive strength of these 9 layers of Chen Xing barriers reached the peak of the level 2 transcendent god. At the very least, even if Gu Xinyue used all her strength, she would not be able to break even 1 layer of Chen Xing barriers. This was almost considered an absolute defense, at least at the peak Emperor level. This was also Kang Xinmu's trump card and confidence to go to the intermediate permanent relic. Other than defense, his other abilities were also extremely outstanding. For example, if Chen Xing's battle patterns were all hidden battle patterns, Kang Xinmu could display more than 20 times the concealment ability of the Mo Wu beast. Not to mention a peak Emperor level, even a true level 4 transcendent god or level 6 transcendent god would not be able to find him. If Kang Xinmu used the power of the Starry Sky inheritance, he would probably be able to hide from anyone who had not reached the supreme level. The effect was comparable to when Deputy General Qing Lin gave Kang Xinmu a hidden power at the Soaring Dragon Fortress. This made Kang Xinmu feel extremely safe. At least in the intermediate permanent relic, as long as he did not fall into any dangerous traps, there was basically no danger. Chapter 5069. This was because there were many old fellows who explored permanent intermediate relics all year round. Therefore, in addition to exploring, they would basically mark some special places or leave some traps. Therefore, when exploring permanent intermediate relics, one would not only face the dangers of other races, but also the traps of one's own race. Fortunately, Kang Xinmu's perception was also very clear. His battle soldier Chen Xing still had the ability to convert specter battle runes. If it was all converted into Spectre battle runes, it could quickly restore the battle soldier's energy, and even Kong Shinmu's own energy. This was not what Kong Shinmu wanted. After all, he had the ability to devour. However, he soon discovered in actual combat that the ability to devour combined with Spectre battle runes could produce several times the effect. It could instantly restore all his energy. This was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was completely superimposed. Therefore, the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body technique and Dark Dragon Filth mastery that Kong Shinmu cultivated could also exert a stronger effect, allowing him to continuously strengthen his own defense. Just as Kong Shinmu and Gu Xinyue were sparring, a few guests had come to the Gu family residence. They were Kong Shinmu's friends from the Dragon Martial Continent. Ran Ran, Xiao Bai, Xiao Yuhua, and Liang Xiao were all now moving towards the peak of the Imperial Realm. However, they were still some distance away. They had cultivated in the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land and had achieved very high achievements. Kong Shinmu discovered that whether it was Ran Ran, Xiao Bai, Xiao Yuhua, or Liang Xiao, their combat strength was much stronger than the last time he saw them. Especially Ran Ran. Kong Shinmu had always admired Ran Ran's cultivation talent. This time, Kong Shinmu discovered that Ran Ran had actually reached the 8th level of the Imperial Realm. As for her combat strength, it should not be too bad. She should even be able to compete with a Supreme God-level opponent. Her route was the same as Kong Shinmu's, which was to defend and then counterattack. Therefore, the effect of the Dark Dragon Filth controlling art she cultivated was extremely strong. After coming to the great world of the dragon gods, she also cultivated the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body art. She could freely switch between her attack and defense forms, which made her more flexible in battle. As for their arrival, Kong Shinmu naturally had to welcome them. Unfortunately, they couldn't be brought along for the expedition to the intermediate permanent ruins. They could only stay here and improve themselves first. When they left, Kong Shinmu gave each of them a lot of cultivation resources. Xiao Bai and Ran Ran were especially reluctant to part with Kong Shinmu. This separation with Kong Shinmu stimulated their daily cultivation. It made them want to work hard to narrow the gap between them and Kong Shinmu. At the moment, Kong Shinmu had not broken through to the Supreme God level. Once Kong Shinmu broke through to the first level of the Supreme God level, it would be even more difficult for them to catch up. Therefore, time was too precious to them. Kong Shinmu only kept Liang Xiao. Liang Xiao, your compatibility with the Divine Dragon Blood is 58. This means that you won't encounter a bottleneck until you reach the 8th level of the Imperial Realm. Kong Shinmu said to Liang Xiao, however, you should have felt the existence of the bottleneck now. You even know that? Liang Xiao was a little shocked. However, on second thought, he scratched his head and said, that's right. You said before that you can help us break through the bottleneck. He recalled what Kong Shinmu had said and still couldn't believe it. If Kong Shinmu could really help them break through the realm without encountering a bottleneck, that would be amazing. No one in the entire Dragon God clan didn't need this ability. Except for geniuses like Ran Ran. Ran Ran's compatibility had reached 72. She wouldn't encounter a bottleneck until she broke through to the Supreme level. However, at the Supreme level, there would definitely be a limit to the improvement of one's strength. One had to know that there was also a difference in strength between the Supreme levels. If she wanted to become an expert of the Supreme level, 72 compatibility would not allow her to reach the peak. At that time, she might still have to rely on Kong Shinmu, come with me. Since they had met this time, Kong Shinmu directly helped Liang Xiao. Liang Xiao followed with a face full of excitement. This guy had been a little crazy recently. Even a lot of white hair had grown out of his head. After all, his teammates, Ran Ran and the other two girls, had not encountered a bottleneck yet. Even Xiao Yuhua could easily reach the 9th level of the Emperor stage and was still one level away from the bottleneck. However, Liang Xiao had encountered a bottleneck first. It was because his compatibility with the Divine Dragon's blood essence was only 58, while Xiao Yuhua's was 59. Therefore, she encountered a bottleneck when she was one level higher than him. As for Xiao Bai, her compatibility with the Divine Dragon's blood essence was 62. Generally speaking, she would only encounter a bottleneck when she reached the 2nd level of the Transcendent God stage. Gu Xinyue's blood essence compatibility was 61. Once she reached the 1st level of the Transcendent God stage, she would feel the existence of a bottleneck. This might be the reason why Gu Xinyue had not broken through. She wanted to consolidate her strength to the strongest level and then hope that it would be easier to break through the bottleneck. Unfortunately, compatibility meant everything. A compatibility of 61 meant that when Gu Xinyue broke through to the 2nd level of the Transcendent God stage, she would definitely encounter a bottleneck that would be very difficult to break through. She would even need more than 10 times the cultivation resources to forcefully break through the bottleneck before she could continue to break through. However, Kang Xinmu could easily settle such a matter. He only needed to rely on his devouring power. He could devour the energy of the dragon mark and transfer it to the bodies of others, allowing them to break through the bottleneck. Such a breakthrough had nothing to do with the bottleneck. However, this was only the last step. The other party needed to work hard first and let them clearly feel the existence of the bottleneck. Only then would the success rate be the highest. Otherwise, it would not be impossible to succeed. Kang Xinmu would need to consume more devouring power to transfer enough dragon mark energy to the other party and allow them to break through. Liang Xiao was left behind by Kang Xinmu. Then, Kang Xinmu brought him to the underground training field of the Gu family residence. There were very few people there. Under Kang Xinmu's orders, no one was allowed to approach this place. Other than Kang Xinmu and Liang Xiao, the only ones present were Gu Xinyue and Emoya. Gu Xinyue already knew about Kang Xinmu's ability. As for Emoya, Kang Xinmu could not hide it from her. If she wanted to know, it did not matter if she was present or not. Therefore, he could only let her be. Chapter 50-70. Liang Xiao followed Kang Xinmu all the way to the underground training field of the Gu family. Gu Xinyue and Emoya followed along the way, discussing something. Warm Moon, did you know that he had this ability before? Have you used it anywhere else? Even Emoya looked a little nervous. This was because the ability to help people break through bottlenecks was simply terrifying. If news of this were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the entire dragon god race. It was hard to predict what consequences this would bring to Kang Xinmu. Thus, Emoya was extremely nervous, afraid that the news would leak out. After all, she was truly concerned about Kang Xinmu. I've never seen it before. Gu Xinyue shook her head, but she still quickly said, when I found out about his ability, he took the initiative to tell me not to be afraid of breaking through to the 1st level of the Transcendent God realm. He had a way to let me directly cross the bottleneck and break through. At that time, I didn't quite believe it, but he said that when he was in the Dragon Martial Continent, he had once helped a senior break through. He had already grasped the method, and this method was definitely something that only he could use. In other words, only one of his seniors in the Dragon Martial Continent knows about this matter? Emoya narrowed her eyes under her veil. It said that it's his best senior, and their relationship is extremely close. He's currently in charge of developing his devouring dragon group. Also, this senior of his seems to be a senior from his birthplace, and has had a great impact on his life trajectory. Gu Xinyue said, he said that without that senior, he might not have been able to go to the Dragon Martial Continent's 4 great Dragon Martial Academies, and he wouldn't have been able to reach his current level in such a short period of time. So I'm quite grateful to his senior. Gu Xinyue blushed as she spoke. if that senior hadn't pushed Kong Shinmu back then, I might have missed the best opportunity to get to know Kong Shinmu. You. Seeing her blush, Amoya couldn't help but laugh. She held her hand and said, if you have any thoughts, just tell him directly. I treat Shinwu like a younger brother. I think you're pretty good. If he doesn't even like you, then I'm afraid no one in this world will be able to enter his eyes. But I feel like he has something on his mind. It's like he's resisting me. Gu Xinyue shook her head and sighed. It's not that he doesn't like me, it's just that he seems to have someone else in his heart. Your intuition should be good. Amoya chuckled softly and said, I also feel this. It seems like he has some burden in his heart. I have to find a chance to ask him. She was of the same generation as Emperor Shi Divine Dragon and Zai Divine Dragon. Moreover, she was a senior who cultivated the power of nature. To Kong Shinmu, it was indeed more cordial. She acutely sensed that there were some things that Kong Shinmu didn't say, which should be related to other inheritances. Could it be that the girl that Kong Shinmu couldn't let go of was from another race's inheritance? The more Amoya thought about it, the more likely it was. If that was the case, it was indeed a little troublesome. After all, the relationship between different races was mostly one of competition. Although there was cooperation, it was mostly on a small scale. It was rare for a dragon to marry a girl from another race in the dragon gods. Once it happened, it would be reviled and opposed by everyone. Basically, there were very few cases of success. No matter what, Amoya planned to find a chance to ask him. Of course, whether Kong Shinmu would say it or not was another matter. If he didn't say it, Amoya wouldn't be so thick-skinned to ask. Even if she treated Kong Shinmu as a younger brother, she would definitely respect his privacy. The two girls followed him to the underground training field of the Gu family's mansion. In the field, Liang Xiao had already transformed into a blood-red divine dragon body. His divine dragon body had reached the 8th level of the martial emperor level, but it seemed that he had also cultivated the body-refining dragon martial arts technique. It looks like the dark dragon defying filth technique. Amoya was very knowledgeable and quickly recognized it. It's the dark dragon defying filth technique again. Gu Xinyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You don't say. Amoya smiled and said, Liang Xiao looks like he often explodes his dragon blood. If that's his main fighting style, then cultivating the body-refining dragon martial arts technique like the dark dragon filth controlling art that strengthens his physique and recovery speed is very suitable for him. Self-exploding dragon blood. Although it's rare in the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land, there are still quite a few. I heard that there's a madman recently. Gu Xinyue covered her mouth and laughed softly. Looks like it's this Liang Xiao. Indeed, in some of the recent training in the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land, Liang Xiao's reckless fighting style was directly evaluated as a madman. As long as he could kill his opponent by exploding his dragon blood, Liang Xiao would definitely not show mercy. Even if he was seriously injured after exploding his dragon blood, he was not afraid. The main reason he was confident was because he had cultivated the dark dragon filth controlling art to the peak of the heaven rank. This meant that his dark dragon filth controlling art was already quite mature. However, compared to the dark dragon filth controlling art that Ran had comprehended to the extreme sage realm, its effects were still a little lacking. On the battlefield, Kong Shinmu wasn't anxious as Liang Xiao turned into a blood-red divine dragon. He first observed Liang Xiao's current state and discovered that he had indeed reached the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm. It looked like he was in a hurry to break through the bottleneck and step into the 9th level of the Emperor realm. Unfortunately, a bottleneck was a bottleneck. Without 10 times the resources and effort, it was impossible to break through the bottleneck. If he wanted to break through the bottleneck by himself, he would need at least 3 to 5 years of hard work and hundreds of thousands of gold dragon coins. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to do it. However, with Kang Xinmu around, this was Liang Zhao's greatest fortune. As Kang Xinmu understood Liang Zhao's current situation, Kang Xinmu immediately released his devouring power. His devouring power contained the energy of the dragon mark. Through the special effects of the devouring power, the energy of the dragon mark was quickly transferred to Liang Zhao's divine dragon body bit by bit. Immediately after, the overall aura of Liang Zhao's blood-red divine dragon body rapidly rose in the eyes of Wuxia and Gu Xinyue. This speed of improvement caused the two ladies' eyes to widen. Even a supreme senior like Wuxia had never seen such a terrifying improvement speed. The energy transfer ability of Kang Xinmu's dragon mark was simply amazing. At this speed, Liang Zhao will be able to break through to the 9th level of the Emperor realm in less than 6 hours. If Liang Zhao works hard on his own, it will take at least 3 to 5 years to break through the bottleneck. With Kang Xinmu's help, he can really ignore the bottleneck. Chapter 5071. Although Wuxia was experienced and knowledgeable and was considered a senior, she had never heard of Jiang Shenwu forcefully increasing someone's cultivation base. This ability was amazing. Wuxia couldn't help but say to Gu Xinyue next to her, "I don't know if his ability is only effective for dragon warriors. Is it useful for those who practice other inherited powers? I don't know about that." Gu Xinyue had a helpless expression on her face. She really didn't know. Generally speaking, she wouldn't consider such a question. Only Wuxia, who practiced divine power, didn't belong to the scope of the dragon warrior's inheritance, so she subconsciously thought of this question. And Kang Xinmu, who was passing the energy of the dragon mark to Liang Zhao, seemed to hear her question. So Kang Xinmu's funny words came over. "I really haven't tried this. Otherwise, Senior Wuxia, have you encountered a bottleneck in the cultivation of divine power? Maybe I can give it a try. You are passing the energy of the dragon mark to Liang Zhao, and we, the cultivators of divine power, need divine power to break through. Where can you absorb it for me?" Wuxia was a little funny. "You focus on improving Liang Zhao. As for me, it's not your turn to worry. What's more, after reaching the supreme level, you need the help of supreme power to improve. You haven't even come into contact with supreme power now, so don't think about these problems." Hearing her words, Kang Xinmu had to stop. Indeed, he wanted to help Wuxia now, but that level was still far from enough. After all, she was a supreme master. Liang Zhao's cultivation momentum, under Kang Xinmu's passing, was constantly and steadily increasing. Wuxia carefully observed this process from the side, and every once in a while, she would sigh with emotion. She really felt that this ability was too heaven-defying. If it could be popularized, how strong would the dragon gods become? Even if it couldn't be guaranteed that everyone could enjoy the effect of passing Kang Xinmu's, even if only a small number of people improved, it would drive the overall strength of the entire dragon gods to skyrocket. Of course, the overall strength of the dragon gods was already very strong. Wuxia didn't expect to make the dragon gods stronger. She didn't even want Kang Xinmu's ability to be exposed. She was also very selfish. She only hoped that the people around her would become better and better. As for others, she didn't care. "If it weren't for those people who left him to die, my brother wouldn't have." When Wuxia thought of her younger brother, she naturally felt a sense of resistance towards the other members of the dragon gods. Then, just as Wuxia had predicted, Kang Xinmu transferred the energy of the dragon mark to Liang Zhao for 6 hours. Liang Zhao finally felt the power of the divine dragon's blood essence in his body, achieving the final transformation. He had broken through to the 9th level of the martial emperor stage. This breakthrough was something he had always dreamed of. Originally, he planned to achieve it within a year, but he didn't expect that with Kang Xinmu's help, he could achieve it within 3 hours. This speed simply made Liang Zhao feel like he was dreaming. "Now, I am also a peak martial emperor expert. Liang Xiao felt inexplicably excited as he felt the power in his body. A peak martial emperor with a cultivation at the peak of the reincarnation tribulation realm was the strongest existence before the supreme god realm. Unfortunately, his current combat strength was still much weaker than that of peak martial emperors like Gu Xinyue and Kong Xinmu. The main difference was in terms of hardware. Whether it was Gu Xinyue or Kong Xinmu, they both had a lot of external support. For example, Gu Xinyue had absorbed the psychedelic star crystal, and Kong Xinmu now had the formless weapon star crystal, which allowed their combat strength to soar. As for Liang Xiao, his main focus was on improving the level of his cultivation and blood essence. He hadn't reached the stage where he really pursued strength. Therefore, it was normal for his current combat strength to be slightly weaker than that of Kong Xinmu and Gu Xinyue. However, his combat strength was still slightly stronger than that of an ordinary peak martial emperor. After all, he had cultivated many powerful dragon techniques, and his comprehension and combat talent weren't weak either. In addition, he had an aura of desperation. As long as his opponent didn't completely crush him, no one would be able to gain much of an advantage against him. I didn't expect to reach the peak martial emperor before them. Liang Xiao felt a little emotional as he tested his current strength. Originally, he had been cultivating with Ran Ran, Xiao Bai, and Xiao Yuhua. The four of them had agreed to see who would break through to the super divine dragon level first. However, he didn't expect that when the three women were still at level 8 martial emperor, he had already reached the peak of level 9 martial emperor. It seemed that Kong Xinmu was really powerful. Liang Xiao couldn't help but be impressed by Kong Xinmu now. Xinwu, thank you so much this time. Liang Xiao suddenly removed his divine dragon form and reverted to a young man in red. He said to Kong Xinmu solemnly. It's all right. Kong Xinmu waved his hand. He had promised Liang Xiao this. When I need to break through to the supreme god level, I will look for you again. Liang Xiao said solemnly. Pfft! Upon hearing Liang Xiao's words, Gu Xinyue and Emoya, who were watching from the side of the training field, couldn't take it anymore. They had thought that Liang Xiao would say something else. They didn't expect him to say something like this. They couldn't help but want to beat him up. As for Kong Xinmu, he looked helpless too. As long as I'm free, you can look for me anytime. Oh right, it should be Xiao Yuhua next. When she reaches the peak martial emperor level and wants to break through to the supreme god level, you can look for me together with her. That's for sure. Liang Xiao was currently very excited. Don't be fooled by his simple-minded appearance. He knew very well what kind of unparalleled opportunity he had obtained. He had broken through the bottleneck. In just 6 hours, he had broken through the bottleneck. Moreover, he hadn't consumed any cultivation resources. Kong Xinmu used his devouring power to transfer energy to him. Of course, what he transferred was the energy from the dragon mark that he had absorbed. However, the energy from the dragon mark was useless to him at the moment. He had been at the peak martial emperor level for a long time. Hence, the energy from the dragon mark was the excess energy from the dragon mark that he had devoured. It was stored in the devouring space. The stored energy from the dragon mark could help dozens of people break through to the supreme god level without exhausting it. Chapter 5072. After Liang Xiao broke through, he didn't stay to disturb Kong Xinmu. Before he left, he glanced at Gu Xinyue and Emoya, then quietly turned to Kong Xinmu and said in a low voice, Xinwu, where did you get another beauty? Oh right, Ran Ran and Xiao Bai miss you so much. If you have time, at least give them a response. Although you have a new woman outside, you can't forget the old one. What are you talking about? Kong Xinmu looked at him with a broken expression. This kid really dared to say that. Did he really think that others couldn't hear him just because he lowered his voice? Perhaps Gu Xinyue really couldn't hear him, but Moya was a supreme powerhouse. Unfortunately, Kang Xinmu didn't tell Liang Xiao about Moya's cultivation, which led to this tragedy. However, although Moya heard this, she didn't show any reaction on the surface. After all, she was wearing a veil, so others couldn't see her expression. However, in Moya's heart, 10,000 bulls were stampeding madly. This Liang Xiao really dared to say anything. What new woman? What old woman? She was actually treated as Kang Xinmu's woman? Moya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, Moya wouldn't take the words of a little rascal like Liang Xiao too seriously. She knew that this kind of person really didn't have a filter on his mouth. He said whatever came to his mind, and the more irritating it sounded, the more likely it was what he meant. It seemed like Liang Xiao really thought that she looked like a couple with Kang Xinmu. This feeling made Moya feel a little strange. Finally, Liang Xiao was sent away by Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu returned to Moya with a bitter smile. "Senior Moya, please don't take it to heart. This kid just didn't think before speaking, so he offended you. It's all right." Moya chuckled softly and said, "She made me sound younger than I am." Only Gu Xinyue was confused. "What's wrong? Did Liang Xiao say anything?" Hearing Gu Xinyue's question, Moya and Kang Xinmu looked at each other and smiled, but they didn't explain. It was better not to let Gu Xinyue know what Liang Xiao had said. Kang Xinmu had basically completed all the preparations for his return. Kang Xinmu had spent several days familiarizing himself with Chen Xing's combat style, mainly because of the sparring with Moya, which gave him a lot of inspiration. Moya's divine power was very strong. Even though she had suppressed her strength to the peak of the martial emperor realm to fight against Kang Xinmu still had a hard time dealing with her. This meant that Moya's divine power had already surpassed her own level. Just like Kang Xinmu, she was an expert with the ability to kill enemies above her level. A peak-level martial emperor could fight a transcendent god level 3. According to Moya, such a strength couldn't even be considered to be a top-notch existence in a mid-grade eternal ruin. Those old men who had been researching and exploring permanent intermediate relics were the ones who had reached the peak of the martial emperor realm. They had improved everything they could. Those old men were Kang Xinmu's biggest opponents on this trip. "Let's choose this permanent intermediate relic." Kang Xinmu took out the list of permanent intermediate relics given by Emperor Shi. His target was a permanent intermediate relic located on the 6th level of the Chaos battlefield. This permanent intermediate relic had been around for 9 months, but it was considered a relatively young relic among the permanent relics. Generally, permanent relics had a lifespan of about 3 to 5 years. In other words, a permanent intermediate relic would basically take 3 to 5 years to fully uncover its secrets, or at least 90% of its secrets. A permanent intermediate relic that had existed for more than 3 years was basically not worth exploring. As for the permanent intermediate relic that Kang Xinmu had targeted, it had only been around for 9 months, so it was considered relatively young. Most importantly, this permanent intermediate relic was controlled by the dragon gods, the demon gods, the ancient phoenix, the talisman water, and the thousand-winged snake. Putting aside the dragon gods, the demon gods and the ancient phoenix now recognized Kang Xinmu. If they entered this relic, the practitioners of the demon gods and the ancient phoenix could choose to join forces. As for the talisman water and the thousand-winged snake, they were the opponents that Kang Xinmu had to face. To deal with the talisman water, Kang Xinmu still had some trump cards. For example, he could use Qi Yan, the princess of the talisman water, as a hostage at a critical moment. Although she was only a princess of the royal family of the talisman water, her status was there. It would not be a problem for her to threaten the opponents of the talisman water. As for the thousand-winged snake, Kang Xinmu did not have any tricks up his sleeves, so he could only face them head-on. Of course, this didn't mean that Jiang Shenwu had to fight to the death with his opponent from the Thousand-Winged Serpent clan. Instead, he only had to fight head-on when he saw a relevant benefit. At other times, he just had to hide. This permanent intermediate relic on the 6th level of the Chaos battlefield is called Emperor Hua's relic. It is said that Emperor Hua, an expert from the ancient times, is buried there, and there are many relics of Emperor Hua. Mo Yat said according to the information on the list. As for Kong Shinmu, he was listening to the suggestions of the demon god ancestor consciousness and the black dragon consciousness in his mind. Emperor Hua was in existence from the same era as me. The demon god ancestor consciousness took the lead and said lazily, "This Emperor Hua is a snake demon, but I have to say that she is very strong. The inheritance of Emperor Hua that she left behind should also be very strong. Unfortunately, it is impossible for you to master the power of Emperor Hua's inheritance. This is not the power of nature, but the real power of inheritance of an ancient expert. For example, the power of the inheritance of the 16-winged heavenly fiend celestial god was researched by several generations of people. Finally, together with the inheritors of the other fiend celestial race, they formed the current fiend celestial race. Only then did the fiend celestial race come to this scale. It is impossible for this Emperor Hua's inheritance to be in this relic. This is most likely a branch palace. Of course, this does not mean that there are not many resources in it. On the contrary, since it is a branch palace, it must also store the important items left by Emperor Hua, and it may even be the key to the inheritance. Even if it is only a key part of the inheritance, it is a great luck to get it. Boy, this inheritance is useless to you, but as long as you can get the key, even if it is only a part, it is enough for you to unseal 2 more layers of seal in your starry sky small world. Jiang Shenwu narrowed his eyes when he heard the demon god ancestor's words. Chapter 5073. The inheritance of Emperor Hua could definitely be counted as a kind of inheritance comparable to the inheritance of the demon god clan. It was a pity that the inheritance of Emperor Hua had not been excavated. The relic of Emperor Hua's inheritance found on the 6th level of the Chaos battlefield was the first one, and it was also a permanent intermediate relic. It was extremely difficult to explore this permanent intermediate relic. At least now, the peak royal realm practitioners of the 5 clans had explored this permanent intermediate relic for 9 months, but they had not gained much. The Dragon God clan, the Demon God clan, the Ancient Phoenix clan, the Talisman Water clan, and the Thousand-Winged Snake clan combined had explored less than 20% of the entire permanent intermediate relic. Therefore, there was still a lot of room for exploration in this relic of Emperor Hua's inheritance. Of course, it was extremely difficult. But once he got something related to Emperor Hua's inheritance, Kong Shinmu would be rich. Although he had no use for it, he could exchange it for unimaginable wealth even if he sold it. It is said that the high-level members of the Dragon God clan have collected a lot of things related to other inheritances, which are the core resources for the cultivation of those inheritances. Moya continued to say to Kong Shinmu, "It is because of the lack of these core resources that some inheritances have not risen in this world. Otherwise, there would be more types of inheritances in our world now. That is to say, the high-level members of the Dragon God clan can't cultivate these inheritances themselves, but they also seal them up and don't let others cultivate them, right?" Hearing this, Kong Shinmu raised his eyebrows. "Yes." Moya smiled gently. The white veil in front of her swayed gently, looking extremely sweet. Kong Shinmu nodded. He didn't think much about it. Anyway, if Kong Shinmu got the core resources of Emperor Hua's inheritance, he would definitely choose to sell them. The high-level members of the Dragon God clan would choose to collect these core resources, so they should buy them at a relatively high price. Only now did Kong Shinmu realize how shabby it was that he only got a reward of 1 million golden dragon coins when he got the holy item of heaven and earth in the primary relic. It was like sending a beggar away. Of course, for Kang Xinmu at that time, 1 million golden dragon coins was indeed enough to solve his urgent need. But now that he thought about it, it was really too little. A saint artifact with 9 layers of engravings was worth at least 10 million gold dragon coins in the market. This was something that could affect the overall strength of a race. But it was useless to think about it now. Fortunately, with Kang Xinmu as the breakthrough point, the warriors of the Dragon God clan indirectly ended the war, so that Kang Xinmu's achievement and reputation reached the peak, and Kang Xinmu was directly rewarded with 80 million gold dragon coins of cultivation resources. Some of these belonged to Emperor Shi, and even the part that belonged to Kang Xinmu was fought for by Emperor Shi. It could be seen that the so-called high-level members of the Dragon God clan were also very selfish. Anyway, after a short discussion with Emoya and Gu Xinyue, Kang Xinmu also planned to go to this permanent medium-level relic of Emperor Nvua's inheritance. But before that, they had to make some preparations. In the military headquarters of the Dragon God clan, there was now a lot of internal information about this medium-level relic, and this information was not available to the outside world. Even Emperor Shi and the Divine Dragon would not be able to obtain the internal information of this relic without authorization. But since Kang Xinmu wanted to go to this relic, he must understand the situation in the relic. After all, this relic had been open for 9 months. In the military headquarters of the Dragon God clan, there must be detailed information about this relic. I will go to the military headquarters to apply. It may take some time. Give me a month. Emoya thought for a while and said, exploring the permanent relic is a big deal, and we can't be careless. So, we must get the exploration records and analysis information of the last 9 months. Because this relic has a great influence, it will take a long time to get the information. We can only wait. Okay. Kang Xinmu was a little disappointed when he heard this. But the consciousness of the demon god ancestor was not surprised at all. Relic like this is regarded as a treasure by every race. If you just want to go in, then you are naturally welcome. But it is not so easy to get the top secret information obtained by their predecessors. It is good enough to apply for the information. A month is not too long. Kang Xinmu could only nod again in agreement. Although it would take a month, it was better to get some information than to go into the relic directly and be killed by someone who was not familiar with the situation. Then I will have to trouble you, senior. Kang Xinmu said to Emoya. Why call me senior? Call me sister. Emoya patted his little head gently and corrected him with a chuckle. Unfortunately, in front of her, Kang Xinmu really could not call her sister now, so, Emoya did not make things difficult for him. She turned and left first. She still had many things to do after applying for the information. On the other hand, Kang Xinmu was a little free all of a sudden. If I want to enter the intermediate relic, my cultivation cannot break through to the level of the Super Dragon God. So, the only thing I can do next is to raise the level of the Starry Sky Inheritance. With the Starry Sky Inheritance, Kang Xinmu had already cultivated to the 3rd level of the Transcendent God. However, it would definitely take a long time to cultivate to the 4th level of the Transcendent God. It was not something that could be done in a short period of time. And Kang Xinmu had not reached the level of the Super Dragon God, so he could not start cultivating the Super Dragon God martial technique. After thinking about it, it seems that I can only practice a little and have more actual combat so that I can fuse with Chunxing earlier? Kang Xinmu thought to himself. Although the formless weapon, Chunxing, was now in Kang Xinmu's possession, there was no compatibility between the two. If Kang Xinmu wanted to fuse with Chunxing as soon as possible, they would probably have to go through many difficult battles together. Moreover, this was a Super Dragon God weapon, a weapon that only dragon martial artists could use. The Starry Sky Inheritance could not be compatible with Chunxing, so if Kang Xinmu wanted to speed up the fusion with Chunxing, he could only use the power of a dragon martial artist to fight. Furthermore, he could only use the power of a dragon warrior to fight. The power of the Starry Sky inheritance could only be used as a small part of support. If I want to train my fusion with Chen Xing, the best way is through actual combat. However, the war has just ended, and the small world of the Outer Realm Fortress has been cleaned up and cleared. Kang Xinmu felt a headache coming on. Where could he find so many opponents? They could not be too weak or too strong. They had to be evenly matched with him. It was too difficult to find such opponents. At this moment, Kang Xinmu suddenly thought of two people. One was Murong Lieni of the ancient Phoenix clan, and the other was Su Yi of the Demon God clan. He wondered how the two of them were doing now. Had they broken through to the Transcendent God level? Perhaps he could find the two of them to spar with. Chapter 5074. Just as Kang Xinmu was worrying about how to find an opponent, a piece of good news came directly from Emperor Xi's mystical dragon. Because the foreign enemies have been defeated, all the foreign supreme experts who invaded the Dragon God's great world have been forced to leave the Dragon God's great world. So, the Dragon Gods are finally at peace. It's precisely because of this that the various Holy Lands have decided to hold a competition invitation. This competition invitation is for dragon martialists of every level. Of course, they must be at least Emperor level. From 1st grade disciples to 9th grade disciples, dragon martialists of every level can participate in the competition of their respective groups. The winner will be rewarded handsomely, and the winner of the lower level group will be qualified to challenge the winner of the higher level group. Once they win, they will receive the rewards of two groups. Kang Xinmu, this is your chance. It just so happens that there is still a month before there is news from Moya. Why don't you represent the 5 extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land and participate in this competition invitation? This news could be said to have hit Kang Xinmu's heart. He had been looking for someone to spar with, but he did not expect to receive such a competition invitation between Holy Lands. Kang Xinmu was a dragon martialist of the 5 extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. Ever since he made a great contribution at the Soaring Dragon Fortress, he had been promoted to a 6th grade disciple. A 6th grade disciple was the 1st to 3rd level of the super mystical dragon. Kang Xinmu's current strength was already publicly recognized as having supreme god level strength. Some people even said that he was qualified to be a 7th grade disciple. However, it was already very good that he had been promoted to a 6th grade disciple. If he were to be promoted to a 7th grade disciple, many dragon martialists would probably be dissatisfied. After all, no one knew what Kang Xinmu's true strength was. Even when Kang Xinmu was promoted to a 6th grade disciple, there were still many people who doubted the fairness of the 5 extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. Thus, if Kang Xinmu represented the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land to participate in this competition, then his status would be that of a 6th-tier disciple of the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land. The 6th grade disciples would definitely face opponents from the 1st to the 3rd level of the Transcendent God stage. This was perfect for Kang Xinmu. If he could obtain the final victory in this group, he would be able to challenge the winner of the Class 7 disciples. Of course, that would be too difficult for Kang Xinmu. After all, a level 7 disciple was in existence from level 4 to level 6 of the Transcendent God stage. It was basically impossible to defeat the strongest person in this group. After all, the strongest person in that group was a Transcendent God level 6. There were even super experts who had reached the Transcendent God level 7. How could Kang Xinmu be a match for those big guys? However, Emperor Xi's mystical dragon soon sent another message. Kang Xinmu, because many people deny and doubt your strength, the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land has once again adjusted your status back to a 5th-tier disciple. If you want to participate in the competition between the Holy Lands, you can participate as a 5th-tier disciple. This made Kang Xinmu speechless. Wasn't this a little too shameless? However, thinking about it carefully, the 5 extreme profound ice holy land wasn't cheating at all. Kang Xinmu was originally a 5th-tier disciple. Previously, he had been promoted to a 6th-tier disciple because of an exception. However, since many people doubted Kang Xinmu's strength, they would first adjust him back to a 5th-tier disciple. This competition between the Holy Lands was an opportunity for Kang Xinmu to prove himself. If he wanted to become a 6th-tier disciple, Kang Xinmu had to at least be the strongest among the 5th-tier disciples, right? If he couldn't even do this, who could admit that he had the strength of a 6th-tier disciple? Therefore, this was an opportunity for Kang Xinmu. An opportunity to be promoted to a 6th-tier disciple without having to pass the test of the 5 extreme profound ice pagoda. Of course, this might not be very attractive to Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu's main concern was whether he could meet an opponent suitable for him so that he could train his compatibility with Chen Xing. This is an invitation for the joint competition between the holy lands of the entire Dragon God's world. In the entire Dragon God's world, even among the 5th-tier disciples, there must be some very strong ones, right? A 5th-tier disciple is the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor, the level of the Dragon Emperor peak. At this level, if I can become the strongest among the 5th-tier disciples, there is no doubt that I can defeat some ordinary 1st-tier and 2nd-tier Supreme God opponents. Even if I only participate in the competition between the 5th-tier disciples, I should be able to meet some opponents. Not to mention, after I win, I can still challenge the winner of the 6th-tier disciples. Kang Xinmu showed a lot of interest in this. Gu Xinyue, Chu Yueqiang, do you want to give it a try? Kang Xinmu said with a smile. I'm a true 6th-tier disciple. I'm afraid I won't be able to get any benefits if I participate in the competition between the 6th-tier disciples. Gu Xinyue smiled bitterly. She had indeed been promoted to a 6th-tier disciple before. No one could say anything about this, but now it had become something that made her uncomfortable. This time, she had also received an invitation. Or rather, almost all the disciples of the 5 extreme profound ice holy land who were still in the 5 extreme profound ice city or in the 5 extreme profound ice city had received this invitation. The invitation stated that in order to obtain rewards, one did not have to obtain first place in the Holy Land invitation competition. Instead, there were rewards for the top 1,000. However, the difference between the rewards for first and second place was huge, not to mention the difference between the top 10 and the bottom 1,000. The rewards were divided into 7 or 8 levels. Of course, first place was the best, second to 5th was another level, then 6th to 20th, then 21st to 100th. A total of 1,000 people could obtain rewards. Even the lowest level could be rewarded with thousands of gold dragon coins. This was already relatively difficult. After all, thousands of gold dragon coins was definitely not a small amount for ordinary dragon martial artists. This was a competition that involved the entire Dragon God's great world. Perhaps the reason was because of the invasion of the 4 major races. This had aroused the cooperation between the various holy lands. They wanted to use such an invitation competition to stimulate the cultivation and combat power of their disciples as dragon martial artists. They did not want to see the invasion of the 4 major races happen a second time. Therefore, it was necessary to strengthen the strength of the dragon martial artists of all the holy lands. At the very least, it was necessary to understand the strength of the disciples of the various holy lands at this stage. One had to know that there were too many holy lands in the Dragon God's great world. Usually, many holy lands did not even interact with each other. This also caused the holy lands to not understand each other at all. After entering the battlefield, it was difficult for the dragon martial artists from different holy lands to cooperate. After this war, the higher-ups of the dragon gods decided to train their soldiers. Chapter 5075. All the Holy Lands attached great importance to this competition between the Holy Lands of the Dragon God's great world. Before the competition, the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land had summoned almost all the disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land to gather in front of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Tower. There were at least hundreds of thousands of disciples in the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land, if not tens of millions. To be able to become a disciple of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land meant that one had a certain level of talent and compatibility with the divine dragon blood. This was the first time Kang Xinmu had seen so many dragon martial artists gathered together. Even on the battlefield, he had never seen such a dense scene of dragon martial artists. What kind of concept was it when hundreds of thousands of dragon martial artists gathered together? In front of the sacred pagoda of Pentapek's mysterious ice, there were over 1,000 layers of it, high and low. According to the arrangement of disciples, the first-class disciples were on the ground. Second-class disciples were one level higher than first-class disciples. Third-class disciples were one level higher than second-class disciples. And so on. There were fewer and fewer people on each level. The number of ninth-class disciples was the least. Kang Xinmu looked up at the highest point and could feel that there were only a few hundred ninth-class disciples. Even the total number of seventh-class disciples was less than 3,000. And most of them were third-class disciples, disciples between the first level of the Dragon Emperor to the 6th level of the Dragon Emperor. One had to know that many dragon martial artists' compatibility with the divine dragon blood could actually only cultivate to the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor. After reaching the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor, they would encounter a bottleneck. Even if they managed to break through to the 6th level of the Dragon Emperor, they would still only be third-class disciples. To break through to the status of 4th-class disciples could be said to be extremely difficult. Therefore, the third-class disciples added up to more than 300,000 people. Among them, the number of first-class disciples, second-class disciples, and third-class disciples was about the same. After all, in the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land, there were many talented dragon martial artists. First-class disciples were all new disciples, and second-class disciples were considered to have entered for a period of time. Hundreds of thousands of dragon martial artists gathered outside the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Tower. It looked like a black mass, denser than the battlefield. All the dragon warriors were flying in human form. In the Dragon God's macro world, there are a total of 122 holy lands. This time, taking advantage of the end of the war, the Holy Lands are finally going to have a large-scale challenge battle between the disciples. All disciples are allowed to participate in the upcoming battle. We will send our disciples in batches to participate in the invitation battle. According to the ranking of the disciples, the first-class disciples will compete first. In the center of the Dragon God's macro world, there is a Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. That Dragon Soul Sacred Tower is where you will compete. This is not only a competition, but also a chance for you to improve. The Dragon Soul Sacred Tower is the burial place of countless ancestors of the dragon martial artists. The essence, energy, and spirit of many powerful ancestors of the dragon martial artists are lingering in it. Everyone who enters the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower will gain more or less enlightenment. Of course, everyone's comprehension will be different. As for how much, it will depend on your own comprehension ability. Dragon Soul Holy Tower. This was a holy land of the Dragon God clan. Normally, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower would not be open at all because there were many ancestors of the dragon martial artists buried there. Letting the dragon martial artists enter at will was an act of desecration. But this time, the 4 clans attacked the dragon gods together, which brought great pressure to the dragon gods as a whole. So, this time, an exception was made to open the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower as a place for the disciples of the various holy lands of the dragon gods to compete. The inside of the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower could be said to be another space. It was a small world. There were many functional formations inside, and it was the most suitable place for the disciples of the Holy Lands to compete. All first-class disciples will compete first. According to each disciple's performance, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower will give a certain evaluation score. In the end, the 122 Holy Lands will be ranked according to the total score. Of course, the ranking of the first-class disciples is not particularly important. It only counts for 1 point. But you must not underestimate it. Our 5 extreme profound ice Holy Land absolutely cannot be ranked at the bottom of the 122 Holy Lands. To tell the truth, we don't know how strong the other Holy Lands are right now. All I can say is that everyone must fight with all their might. The Dragon Soul Sacred Tower was a sacred place. The evaluation score would definitely be very fair. So, the ranking of the 122 Holy Lands this time was a matter that concerned the honor of the Holy Lands. The overall strength of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land could be seen through this time. The matches of the first-class disciples will take 3 days. In other words, the matches of the first-class disciples will take 3 days. It is not that the matches will be over in 3 days. Inside the Dragon Soul Holy Land, there are formations related to time that can turn these 3 days into 30 days. The actual time that you will experience is 30 days. Everyone, the honor of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land will depend on you to defend it. In front of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Tower, several young elders were giving exciting speeches. In that case, as a 5th-class disciple, my match will be in about half a month. Kang Xinmu thought to himself. Right now, he was in the crowd, sensing the dragon warriors around him. He really did not sense any particularly strong existences. After all, the 5th-class disciples were basically at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, which was also the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor. Although this level was similar to his, in reality, Kang Xinmu's strength had already reached the 3rd level of the Super Divine Dragon. This had completely surpassed the 5th-class disciples. He had even reached the limit of a 6th-class disciple. It is said that if you become the first among the 5th-class disciples, you will be qualified to challenge the winner of the 6th-class disciples. If I succeed in the challenge, the bonus points for the 5th-class disciples will definitely be very high, right? Kang Xinmu continued thinking to himself. Although he did not have much sense of belonging to the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land, his master, the Dragon Emperor Shi, was also a member of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land. As a disciple, it was normal for him to fight for his master's honor. Of course, it could not be said that there were no strong existences in the other Holy Lands. It was said that in this war, Kang Xinmu was not the only strong existence that emerged. There were also many dragon warriors whose actual combat strength far exceeded their cultivation level. These would all be strong opponents for Kang Xinmu. For example, among the 5th-class disciples of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land, Kang Xinmu felt a few suppressed auras. These auras were actually very strong, but they were very low-key. Such dragon warriors definitely existed in the other 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land. Chapter 5076. Following that, the grand arranged battle between the Holy Lands began just like that. Kang Xinmu naturally returned to the Gu family residence in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City to cultivate and consolidate his cultivation with Gu Xinyue and the others. Chu Yueqiang was also a disciple of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. She was at the peak of the Dragon Emperor's level of cultivation and had long been a 5th-class disciple of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. It was just that she had been sent to the Dragon Martial Continent to be a mentor at the Dragon Martial Academy. Therefore, Chu Yueqiang would naturally participate in the battle between the Holy Lands. The rewards were plentiful. As long as one was in the top 1,000 among the disciples of the same level, one would be able to obtain the rewards. If one was in the top 100, the rewards would be considerable. There were a total of 122 holy lands participating in the battle. Therefore, to enter the top 100, one would basically have to be the strongest disciple of each holy land. With so many experts gathered together, one could imagine how difficult it would be to stand out from the crowd. Kang Xinmu was naturally not worried. As a fifth-class disciple, he was already considered outstanding among the fifth-class disciples. Few could compare to him. Especially after his formless weapon, the Chen Xing, was forged. In the next few days, Kang Xinmu, Chu Yueqiang, and Gu Xinyue stayed at the Gu family residence. They cultivated together and even attacked the dark creatures on the reverse side of the continent in the starry pocket world. Those dark creatures were very strong. Kang Xinmu and the others directly found the dark creatures on the reverse side of the swamp. Through the shrine, they crossed to the reverse side of the continent and found dark creatures that were similar to them. During this process, Kang Xinmu fought intensely and his compatibility with the formless weapon, the Chen Xing, kept increasing. He was also getting more and more comfortable with the Chen Xing. If Kang Xinmu could only unleash half of its power when he first obtained the Chen Xing, now Kang Xinmu could already unleash 60% of its power. Of course, this was only 60% of the power he could unleash at his current stage. After all, he was not at the level of Super Shenron. If he used Chen Xing, which was at the level of Super Shenron weapon, he could only exert 30% of its power at most. In other words, Kang Xinmu could now exert 60% of Chen Xing's 30% power. This could already be considered very good. Of course, Kang Xinmu would not be satisfied with this. He wanted to become even stronger when he stepped onto the stage. Unfortunately, it was not easy to fuse with the dragon weapon. Even with the devouring power, Kang Xinmu could not easily achieve his goal. Therefore, it was almost impossible for Kang Xinmu to rush for quick results. Fortunately, just this Chen star alone was many times more powerful than ordinary top-notch divine spiritual dragon weapons. Kang Xinmu's advantage among the fifth-grade disciples was too great. Even among the 122 dragon warrior holy lands, there were very few grade 5 disciples who could compare to Chen Xing in terms of dragon weapon. Just as Kang Xinmu and the rest were cultivating, the competition between the first-grade disciples began. First-grade disciples were around the first to second level of the Dragon Emperor. The competition between dragon martial artists of this level was not particularly eye-catching, but it was not completely unnoticed. After all, many of the first-grade disciples were new disciples, and the various holy lands still paid attention to the cultivation of new disciples. One must know that the minimum requirement to join a holy land was to have the blood essence compatibility of the Dragon Emperor's 5th level. Therefore, as long as one was a disciple of a holy land, reaching the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor was almost guaranteed. Hence, the competition between first-grade disciples and second-grade disciples was a competition between new disciples. Those who could win these two competitions were basically likely to become the mainstay of the various holy lands in the future. Each competition lasted for 3 days, but for the contestants, it was equivalent to a month. In the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, the flow of time was slowed down, and many things could happen in these 30 days. The specific rules of the competition seemed to be different for each first-grade disciple. Therefore, Kang Xinmu did not investigate the specific rules of the competition between first-grade disciples and second-grade disciples. He only knew that 3 days after the start of the competition between the disciples of the 122 Holy Lands, the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land sent over some bad news. In the competition of the first-class disciples, the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Lands' overall ranking was actually only 95th. This meant that the overall strength of the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Lands' first-grade disciples was far inferior to the other Holy Lands. This meant that the new disciples of the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land were useless. They were completely useless, to the point that they were a laughingstock. This was because among the 122 Holy Lands, there were some holy lands that had already declined long ago. These declining holy lands had too few new disciples, causing it to be very difficult for them to obtain any good results in such a large-scale competition. However, the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land had never been considered to have declined, and because of Emperor Xi's divine dragon, they even had extremely strong prestige. In the end, they actually obtained 95th place in the first-grade disciple competition. This was simply astounding. Because of this, many experts of the dragon god race somewhat looked down on the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. So, the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land has also declined these past few years. There's still Emperor Xi's divine dragon that can be considered the top and can hold up the front, but in the end, these first-grade disciples are actually so weak? This is too disappointing. Originally, I wanted to send my son to the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, but now it looks like I'll have to go somewhere else. Many people's discussions brought enormous pressure to the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. Of course, this enormous pressure only came from the upper echelons of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. As for the various 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land disciples, they were all filled with righteous indignation. Especially the second-grade disciples, all of them gritted their teeth, wanting to win glory for the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. Among the first-grade disciples, it said that the best result of our 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land is only 450th place. At least 3 of us second-grade disciples need to enter the top 100 to make up for this kind of humiliation. How many thousands and tens of thousands participated in the first-grade disciple trial? To be able to obtain 450th place was also something that was not easy. But, this guy was the strongest among the first-grade disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. This was somewhat unjustifiable. No matter what, in the top 500 places, a holy land should have at least 3 to 5. This 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land actually only had one person enter the top 500. This undoubtedly showed that the first-grade disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land were weak to the max. Chapter 5077. 3 days later. News from the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower finally came back. In these 3 days, all 122 Sacred Lands second-class disciples competed on the same stage and competed with each other in many matches. Finally, the ranking was determined. The 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Lands second-class disciple was ranked 86th out of all 122 Sacred Lands. This news undoubtedly shocked all the dragon martialists of the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land. Originally, it was already hard to believe that a first-class disciple was ranked 95th out of all the sacred lands. But this time, a second-class disciple was actually only ranked 86th. Didn't this mean that this batch of newly recruited disciples of the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land were not good enough? This truly made the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Lands face somewhat ugly. Although first-class disciples and second-class disciples were only dragon martialists below the Dragon Emperor's 5th level, dragon martialists of this level were the future strength of every sacred land. Now, the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land was actually ranked 80th or 90th. Didn't this mean that the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land's future development potential would be much weaker than the other sacred lands? Of course, news about the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land basically only spread around here. After all, the 122 sacred lands basically only paid attention to the situation of their own sacred lands. There were so many other sacred lands. How could they understand and pay attention to each and every one of them? Although the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Lands results weren't that great, there were many other sacred lands that were much worse than the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land. Those sacred lands also didn't have outsiders to mock them. It was just that they definitely felt worse in their hearts. Of course, there were still some sacred lands that were hostile to the 5 Extreme Black Ice Holy Land that would sprinkle salt on their wounds at this time. Just in the past few days, there were two groups of people from the other two sacred lands that came to the 5 extreme black ice holy land to spout nonsense. It looked like they were here to travel, but in reality, they were here to show off and mock the 5 extreme black ice holy land. Of these two sacred lands, one was called the Wild Sand Glorious Sword Holy Land. It was the sacred cultivation ground of the Wild Sand Glorious Sword Dragon and had always had quite a bit of competition with the 5 extreme black ice holy land. Because they had competed for a long time, some old grudges were naturally born. Even now, the disciples of both sacred lands didn't like each other. The competition between the 122 holy lands this time could be considered to have encouraged the Wild Sand Glorious Sword Holy Land's arrogance a little. The Wild Sand Glorious Sword Holy Land's first-class disciples were ranked 8th out of all 122 holy lands, while the second-class disciples were ranked 11th. Although not all of them were in the top 10, their average ranking was more than a level higher than that of the 5 extreme dark ice holy land. It could even be said that the difference was like heaven and earth. This even meant that the overall strength of a second-class disciple of the 5 extreme profound ice holy land was probably inferior to a first-class disciple of the Wild Sand Glorious Sword Holy Land. Therefore, the dragon martialists of the Wild Sand Radiant Sword Sacred Land were all seething and inflated. This time, a young elder of the Wild Sand Glorious Sword Holy Land had led a team to the 5 extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land to show off their might. They had ridiculed the 5 extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land's dragon martialists in high spirits. Unfortunately, the first-grade and second-grade disciples of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land weren't doing too well. This made the dragon martialists of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land unable to retort even if they wanted to. They could only endure the ridicule. This made all the disciples of the 5 extreme profound ice holy land feel extremely uncomfortable. There absolutely can't be any more mistakes in the upcoming competition between the third-grade disciples. Many people were thinking this in their hearts. At this time, the third-grade disciples of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land also received the news. In the competition, they had to display their strongest techniques as much as possible. They couldn't hide anything. After all, they were all members of the dragon god race, so there was no point in hiding anything. They had to strive to obtain better results in the competition. Moreover, the various great teachers of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land began to impart to their disciples so that they could grasp more of the techniques of their own dragon martial skills, so that they could perform better in the competition. With such a mobilization, the third-grade disciples set off together. Third-grade disciples were existences from the 5th to 6th levels of the Dragon Emperor. And Holy Land disciples of this level were no longer considered newcomers. Because dragon martialists who could cultivate to the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor were qualified to become Holy Land disciples. Therefore, there were many dragon martialists who could only cultivate to the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor and had been third-grade disciples for a very long time. Their strength and battle prowess were much stronger than first-grade and second-grade disciples. Therefore, it could be said that this competition was a competition between the core strength of the various holy lands. In addition, the various great teachers and powerhouses were all helping their disciples improve, allowing their battle skills to improve significantly. In the eyes of the dragon martialists of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land, this competition wouldn't be too easy to have any problems. At the very least, they would be able to obtain a normal ranking. Regarding this, Kang Xinmu didn't think too much about it. In any case, he didn't know anyone who was a third-grade disciple of the 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Among the people he knew, he was a 5th-grade disciple, while Gu Xinyue was a 6th-grade disciple. Apart from the two of them, there were also Ran Ran, Liang Xiao, Xiao Yuhua, and Xiao Bai. The 4 of them were all 4th-grade disciples. In fact, they already had the strength of a 5th-grade disciple, but this year's 5 extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Tower hadn't opened yet, so they hadn't become 5th-grade disciples yet. I can pay some attention to the competition between the 4th-grade disciples, Kang Xinmu thought to himself. Whether it was Ran Ran, Liang Xiao, Xiao Yuhua, or Xiao Bai, their talent and battle prowess were all solid. Back when the martial dragon continent had faced the invasion of the demonic beasts, they had fought their way out through blood and fire. Their ability to react on the spot was definitely much stronger than that of ordinary dragon martialists. As for Kang Xinmu himself, he was doing his best to improve himself. His 9th stage Extreme Dao Hui Dragon Burst had yet to reach the Extreme Sage Realm. In fact, it was just a little bit away from the Saint Realm. Therefore, improving himself as much as possible was more beneficial to him. And 3 days later, the results of the competition between the 3rd grade disciples were transmitted back. This time, because it wasn't a competition between the newly ascended disciples, the 3rd grade disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land finally broke the nightmare brought back by the 1st grade and 2nd grade disciples. The 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land had obtained 33rd place in the competition between the 3rd grade disciples. 33rd place wasn't considered too bad. Although it was still a little lacking compared to the 12th place of the Wild Sand Holy Land, compared to the competition between the 1st grade and 2nd grade disciples, the 3rd grade disciples were already much better. And at this time, a piece of news finally came out. It was said that the first match of the competition in the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower was a free-for-all. In the free-for-all, including the Wild Sand Holy Land, several other holy lands had actually joined hands to target the disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land. This was the reason why the 1st grade and 2nd grade disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land didn't have good results. And the reason why the 3rd grade disciples were like this was because the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower had already sensed this unfair situation. Chapter 5078. The Dragon Soul Sacred Tower was an existence with intelligence and spirituality. The Dragon Soul Sacred Tower was aware of the unfair situation in the competition and had already given some punishment to the relevant sacred grounds. Of course, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower would not change the ranking of those sacred grounds. However, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower would restrict the participation of those sacred grounds in the upcoming competition. Originally, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower allowed every disciple of each sacred ground to participate in the competition. However, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower made a decision to only allow half of their disciples to participate in the next 3 competitions. This way, their total points would definitely be much lower than the other sacred grounds. There was no other way. Who asked them to join forces to target the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land and cause it to obtain such an ugly result? Ordinary people might not know about this, but the supreme powerhouses of each sacred ground had received the notice that no unfair situation was allowed in the entire competition. However, since they turned a deaf ear to it, there was nothing they could do about it. With fewer people, the total points they would obtain would be lower, and their ranking would be lower. Although only half of the disciples participating would definitely be stronger, the total points they would obtain would probably only be 60 to 70% of the original amount. As a result, the sacred grounds would only be able to obtain relatively poor results in the following competitions for the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade disciples. This wasn't something that could be decided by the quality of the disciples. After all, every participating sacred ground disciple could obtain points for the sacred ground. It was just a matter of how many points they obtained. When the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower made this decision, those few sacred grounds were instantly dumbfounded. As for the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land, they were naturally incomparably delighted when they received this news. This was too great. The good results those few sacred grounds obtained by targeting the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land would instantly be beaten back to their original state in the next 3 competitions. After all, the final ranking of each sacred ground was based on the performance of each grade of disciple. Moreover, the performance of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade disciples didn't have much of an impact. the total points they obtained weren't much. As for the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade disciples, the points they obtained were multiplied by 4, 5, and 6 times. How could this make the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land unhappy? Those holy lands really went for wool and came home shorn. In the wild sand glorious sword sacred ground, the elders and disciples who had come to show off their prowess had all left with ashen faces. They were too ashamed to stay here. If there were no accidents, their wild sand glorious sword sacred lands points would probably fall below the top 50 in the next 3 matches. It might even be worse. It would be very difficult for them to stabilize their position. It could be said that they had shot themselves in the foot, and it was not only the wild sand glorious sword holy land that suffered from this. After all, they weren't the only ones targeting the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. Moreover, many other holy lands had suffered the same fate as the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. After all, of the 122 holy lands, there were many holy lands that had conflicts with each other. The 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land wasn't the only holy land that had been targeted. Of course, the supreme experts of the 5 extremes mysterious ice holy land were also puzzled, including Emperor Xi and the Divine Dragon. They only knew that there was quite a bit of competition between them and the wild sand glorious sword holy land, but they hadn't offended the other holy lands. After secretly asking around, they discovered the truth. It turned out that the wild sand glorious sword holy land and the other holy lands had joined forces. After joining forces, the other holy lands helped to target the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, and the wild sand glorious sword holy land also helped to deal with the other holy lands' targets. They could be said to have joined forces and helped each other. No wonder the Dragon Soul Holy Tower punished these holy lands so heavily. It turned out that they had targeted several holy lands at the same time, causing them to receive a poor result. No matter what, the matter was finally resolved now. As the punishments of the wild sand glorious sword holy land and the other holy lands were announced, everyone was delighted. Even the entire Dragon God Clan Great World talked about these holy lands with disdain and contempt. Too shameless. They actually joined forces with several holy lands to target their own competitors? Fortunately, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower represented the ancestors of the entire Dragon God Clan. It had its own consciousness and placed the development of the Dragon God Clan as its top priority. It could be said to have zero tolerance for this kind of situation. Since that was the case, Ran and the others no longer felt any psychological pressure. Originally, they had thought that the disciples of the other holy lands were really strong, but now, it seemed that they really didn't need to worry too much. With their strength, it was more than enough for them to handle the 4th-class disciples with ease. They could even bring extremely high honor, ranking, and points to the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. When the competition for the 4th-class disciples was about to begin, even Kong Xinmu was a little nervous. If the first 3 competitions had insignificant influence on the overall ranking of the holy lands, then starting from the competition for the 4th-class disciples, the points obtained by each holy land in the competition were important enough to even affect the final ranking. Jiang Shenwu was a member of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. Moreover, he had seen the wild sand shining sword holy land's dragon martial practitioners who had come to show off their strength. Thus, he naturally hoped that the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land could obtain a better result. The 5th-class disciples have me. As long as I can obtain first place among the 5th-class disciples, then our 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land can at least be ranked in the top 3. The first place of each competition had a great influence, and the total number of points awarded was also extremely shocking. At the very least, it could increase the total points of the Holy Land by a huge amount. And Kong Xinmu was determined to obtain first place among the 5th-class disciples. Moreover, if he could participate in the competition for the 6th-class disciples, he could also obtain an additional point and contribute more to the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. Therefore, he wasn't worried about the 5th-class disciples, but was rather concerned about the competition for the 4th-class disciples. For the disciples participating in the competition, they had to stay in the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower for a month, but for outsiders, it was only 3 days. After waiting for 3 days, the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower finally announced the results of the competition for the 4th-class disciples. The results of the competition for the 4th-class disciples. The 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land was ranked 4th. When this news came out, many of the Dragon Martial practitioners who paid more attention to the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land and those who didn't pay much attention to the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land were all shocked. The 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land's original ranking wasn't good. How did it suddenly jump to 4th place? Chapter 5079. The 4th-class disciples had returned. The 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land's Dragon Martial practitioners welcomed them as if they were heroes. Very quickly, the news spread. This time, the 4th-class disciples were able to obtain 4th place mainly because of several key figures, and the most important one was Ran Ran. Ran Ran had now reached the peak Divine Dragon Inheritance Blood Essence grade of the Dragon Emperor 9th layer. Her battle prowess far surpassed all the Dragon Martial practitioners of the Dragon Emperor level. In the mixed battle of the 4th-class disciples, Ran Ran defeated 77 opponents by herself, bringing an extremely high number of points to the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land. And in the ranking battle that followed, Ran Ran finally obtained 2nd place. Among all the 4th-class disciples of the Holy Land, Ran Ran obtained 2nd place. Unfortunately, she did not obtain 1st place. However, the 1st-place disciple had only defeated Ran Ran by a slight margin. In summary, Ran Ran did not have a very strong dragon weapon. Her dragon weapon had not been fused to a very high level, so she could not display too much power. At the very least, compared to her opponents, she was still quite lacking. One had to know that her final opponent was a rather old Dragon Emperor powerhouse. That powerhouse was at the 9th layer of the Dragon Emperor and possessed extremely terrifying strength. That was a powerhouse that could explore a permanent intermediate level ruin. Moreover, there was more than one such powerhouse. Ran Ran had already defeated many such powerhouses and finally obtained 2nd place. It could be said that Ran Ran's battle prowess was already very terrifying, even comparable to Kong Shinmu. However, what Kong Shinmu did not expect was that in the battle of the 4th-class disciples, there were too many peak 9th layer existences of the Dragon Emperor. Logically speaking, the 4th-class disciples were all at the 7th to 8th layer of the Dragon Emperor. Logically speaking, when the Holy Tower raised the ranks of the disciples once a year, some strong existences would definitely be able to become higher-ranked disciples and obtain more cultivation resources. But now, it seemed that there were still many Dragon Warrior disciples in the Holy Land who did not put in any effort to raise the level of their disciples. For example, the opponent who defeated Ran Ran already had the strength of a grade 5 disciple, and could even fight a grade 6 disciple. In the end, he was still a 4th-class disciple. They couldn't be said to have violated the rules. After all, the rules set by the Dragon Soul Holy Tower were to allow Dragon Warriors of the same rank to compete on the same stage. The other party was indeed a grade 4 disciple, so there was nothing he could do about it. Moreover, Kong Shinmu did not have the qualifications to criticize him on this point. His current strength had long since reached the level of a grade 6 disciple, perhaps even the peak of a grade 6 disciple, but he was still a grade 5 disciple in the end. Every Holy Land was trying their best to transfer their stronger disciples to lower-level places so that their own Holy Land could obtain better results in this competition. Of course, he couldn't just casually transfer the rank of his disciples. There were also those with Dragon Emperor's peak cultivation who wanted to participate in the 1st-grade disciple to 3rd-grade disciple competition. In the end, they were blocked by the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, because they were temporarily transferred disciples. The Dragon Soul Holy Tower had already seen through this point. Moreover, although the division of disciples was based on rank, there was still a cultivation limit. For example, a first-grade disciple was the grade of the Dragon Emperor's divine dragon inheritance from the first to the second level. Therefore, it was impossible for the participants to surpass the fourth level of the Dragon Emperors. This was a relatively large limit, and also to ensure that there wouldn't be too many unfair situations in the competition. This time, Ran obtained second place in the fourth-grade disciple competition. This could be said to be an extremely high honor, and it brought glory to the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land. Apart from her, there were also many dragon warriors who obtained good results. Among them, Xiao Yuhua, Xiao Bai, and Liang Xiao obtained 7th, 8th, and 11th place respectively. It was precisely because of this that the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land could actually reach 4th place among all the Holy Lands in this time's 4th grade disciple competition. Unfortunately, Ran didn't obtain first place. Otherwise, the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Lands' overall results would probably directly jump to the top 2. The 4th grade disciples returned, each and every one of them in high spirits. And Ran, who obtained second place overall, had now become a celebrity in the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land. Originally, although Ran was very talented, she didn't have a chance to display it. Especially with so many disciples in the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land, who would pay attention to her. But now, this competition let everyone know of Ran's existence. Of course, the upper echelons of the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land had naturally long been paying attention to Ran. This was because Ran's divine dragon blood essence compatibility was too high, and she could directly break through to a supreme level without encountering a bottleneck. This was rarely seen in the history of the Dragon God's great world. And this time, Ran's performance made the upper echelons and elders of the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land feel gratified. Ran, he was indeed an expert with extraordinary talent. In the future, she would probably become an important figure in the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land. In comparison, Xiao Bai and the other 2 weren't as dazzling, but it was already very good. After all, they had only joined the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land for less than 2 years. The other disciples that had joined the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land for 10 years had not achieved such dazzling achievements. It could be said that many dragon martial artists would shine in this competition and obtain the favor of powerhouses. And when the 4th grade disciples returned, it was time for the 5th grade disciples to set off. Kong Xinmu only briefly met with Ran and the others before leaving. As a 5th grade disciple of the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land, he was about to step onto the next competition. Moreover, among the 5th grade disciples, he didn't know anyone that was too strong. It could be said that he had cultivated in the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land for very few days, so he naturally didn't know anyone else. However, he was confident that he could obtain first place in the following competition among the 5th grade disciples. I have to obtain first place. If I can't obtain first place, then only death awaits me when I head to the permanent mid-grade ruins. Kong Xinmu was especially strict with himself because he knew very well that if he wanted to obtain benefits in the permanent mid-grade ruins and preserve his life, the difficulty would be far greater than obtaining first place in this competition. After all, a competition was just a competition, but the exploration of the permanent mid-grade ruins was extremely risky. If he wasn't careful, he could die inside. Therefore, before that, Kong Xinmu wanted to use this competition to test himself and improve himself so that he could better deal with the exploration of the permanent mid-grade ruins. What kind of inheritance would there be in Emperor Wa's ruins? Kong Xinmu didn't know, but he had to give it a try. Otherwise, how would he improve his starry sky small world? The 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land's several thousand 5th grade disciples embarked on the journey together with Kong Xinmu.